Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
To MythVision Podcast. You are about to attain true gnosis. Neal, Gnostic Informant, ladies and gentlemen, is in the house. We're going to talk about Attis. Are we full of shit? Are we right? Are we making up stuff about Attis?
Right.
And I have to say, first of all, thank you for bringing this to my attention. You did the same thing with Dionysus well before I even started doing documentaries. Like, I had already known about Dionysus, but it was like Dennis McDonald arena of Dionysus, which is really like fun Euripides stuff. But then you were like, no, the cult, like there's so much more cultic stuff that we can get into.
It's not just the myths. It's the rituals of the Romans that inspire things.
This when it got really, I guess you'd say, rubber hit the road. And so I think everyone in the chat that's here, if you haven't subscribed to my brother Neal, make sure you do. To Neal, make sure you do so. And we're going to be covering some sources, some scholarship, putting some 1 + 1 = 2 together kind of stuff along the way. And like, why did people start thinking Attis was or did become a risen god? Why did people start thinking that? You know what I mean?
And this was an early idea in early Christianity, as we see when in Hippolytus is against heresies, that there were Phrygian Christians in Phrygia, which is where Attis is the god worshipped, who thought Jesus fulfilled Attis.
I love that.
Hence the Nicene preacher. We'll get to that. We'll show that.
The Montanist as well.
The Montanist movement. We're also from Phrygia.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting information. Yes, let's go ahead and say up front, disclaimer, every myth is different. Okay. Yes, they are not Xerox copies. Yes, they are clearly different stories. But when the ancients themselves equate Attis with Adonis, with Osiris, with Dionysus, and you could read their myths and go,
the Homeric hymn to Attis, it's called, where whoever wrote that hymn is basically going, in Phrygia they call you Attis, in Egypt they call you Osiris, in Syria they call you Adonis. They're doing this early on. This is pre-Christians times too. The Homeric hymn. This was kind of a thing people like to do. This is, they like to have this. They like to do this for a lot of reasons.
Thank you for being Neal's patron today, Wendy. We really
thank you.
Freaking
Wendyberg in the house.
Seriously, Wendy's something else, and we got some members tonight. Mukunda in the house. We just interviewed him on Indian myths, and we have a lot more to go into. He has so much information.
I know.
Golly. And then Forrest Minor, again, another man. So many people are interested in immortality the right way. This is the true path,
And I want to, speaking of Mukunda real quick, I want to get him on, not just for a live, for a proper, how I do my videos where I edit and I make the intros, and I want to do that. I think he's worthy of that for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. We got to do a proper video for him.
Absolutely. And listen, we're going to be embarrassed because we got really smart super chatters in the house too. We'll get to these supers, JC. I hope you stick with us to the end, but thank you for your support. JC's super wicked smart. A lot of the early birds that were commenting were already making me go, damn, let me double check my sources. Let me go into this a little bit deeper, make sure I have enough here. But
we will.
We are definitely going to dive in. So hold on. It says you're a member again. Hold on. Let me look at the YouTube side.
Nice.
Upgraded membership to advanced.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Wow. That's cool.
He took it from like, I'm going to do the small initiator. Nah, screw that. I'm a priest in the Attis cult. That's what he just did. Except in this one, you don't have to, castrate yourself. So you're good. You're good.
Give me 1 second. I want to go grab my Robert Turkin copy so I can hold it and show people.
Okay. Okay. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, how's everybody doing in the chat? Might as well address you and make recognition here. Jerry, very first one here. Theophilus in the house. Doom Guy, come for the myth, stay for the Gnostic. Mandy Moorhall, what is satire, right? Everything from Mandy's satire. Amalek in the house. Daniel Kyle, thank you so much for being a member, Daniel. John Dutchman. We got a lot of people here, a lot of fam. Of course, Wendy's in the house. I'm just showing some love to some people. Skyline. Where's Truth Seeker? I saw Truth Seeker earlier. I was commenting. Oh, Seeking Truth. Sorry. Seeking Truth is here. Okay. We got a lot of people tuning in, Neal. I think it's important that you roll out the red carpet for who Attis is. Yeah. And are we liars for seeing these parallels? But let's go a little further.
Well, let's give them the information and let them go decide what they think about what's, because to be honest up front.
Yeah.
We cannot definitively know for sure if the gospel authors are inspired by Attis. We don't know. There's no way of possibly, there's no certainty there. Right. However, I think it's beyond the realm of likely. So I think we're in the realm of likely, almost to the probable realm, depending on if you accept John the Lydian. And now we'll get to John the Lydian. Okay. If you accept what John the Lydian says, we've gone from likely into the realm of probable. I'm not kidding. I think the evidence does speak to there being something going on here. We will get there, I promise. And this is not me making this up. This is well established by Robert Turkin, Cult of the Roman Empire, in the first chapter, and also Antonia Tripolitis. Also, they both came to the same conclusion that the Hilaria festival was instituted by Claudius in the 40s, which is before the Gospels are written. But what's even crazier about that? It's almost contemporaneous to the point where it's like that makes it even more tempting that it's so close.
I mean, dude, it's imperial.
Think about today. Who's copying? You're not copying music from the 1800s. You're not copying music from 1910. You're going to copy music from the last couple decades
around you.
You might redo Beatles even now. People still redo Beatles stuff all the time. With the last 4 decades is all contemporary with and as our time basically. Mm-hmm. And so if it's true that Claudius did institute this Phrygian religion into Rome in the 40s and makes this festival called Hilaria, where there's 3 days of mourning and then a day of rejoicing, then all of a sudden the gospel author, you're thinking maybe the gospel authors did incorporate some of this stuff into the story of Jesus. It doesn't mean Jesus didn't exist.
Right.
It doesn't automatically mean Jesus didn't exist if they borrowed some elements of Roman religion. It just means they borrowed some elements of Roman religion and applied it to Jesus. That's all that matters. That's all it means.
And again, just so people could see, we pulled these up earlier, just so everybody knows, Neal lives like 3 minutes from me. And so he came over. We got a little bit of sun, summertime. And
it's good for people to read the Britannica article. It's good. It's good for people to see that. Yeah.
Just so they understand what Hilaria means. Yeah. So go ahead and tell us, what is Hilaria? And then we need to know who the god Attis is, Neal.
Well, as it states right here in this article, that there's in Roman religion. And by the way, we can anchor it. Let me just explain. I'll tell you the anchoring there. Hilaria was a festival in Rome that was celebrated in March, late March. It starts at March 15th on the Ides of March. It goes all the way to March 28th. The whole second half of March was all festivities. It was like it's called the Holy Week. Now you're like, wait a minute, that's like 2 weeks. What are you talking about? Well, the Holy Week starts on March 22nd, but the festival starts in March 15th, and they kick it off with almost like a Lent. They have certain foods that they drink, like milk, and I think there's like one food that they're allowed to eat or something like that. And don't quote me on that, but there was some sort of fast happening from between March 15th and March 22nd, which was during that period. But then at March 22nd, they kick off this Holy Week. And it's funny because in Greek Orthodoxy, Christian Orthodoxy, that's what they call the Pascha, the Holy Week. They call it the same thing, Holy Week, Holy Week. And they're both spring equinox festivals. Anyways, during this week, they would do a bunch of rituals. They would have the one day is called the Dendra. They have the Dendraphori come out. These are woodcutters, the Woodcutters Guild. And they would carry wood, and they would carry branches from a pine tree from a pine tree into the sacred area where the temple is, and they would pin an effigy of the god Attis onto a wooden a branch from the pine tree. They would bury it in the ground for 3 days. During those 3 days, they would mourn, ritually mourning. People would be in the streets whipping themselves with whips. There would be people. This was actually a rare thing, but people did castrate themselves during this period, and in order to become a priest of this is how priests were initiated into Asia Minor. Now someone might go, that's way too far gone. But actually, the first couple of centuries of Christianity, there were people castrating themselves because, I mean, think about what Jesus says. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, pluck it out. Well, there was people who said, my only thing that's really causing me to sin is down there. And they would pluck that out. That's
and even Paul, that unique idea that you're describing is something that seemed to be in the air. That
something was going on.
Yeah. Something going on with the philosophy and finding a way to incorporate it.
And Christianity exploded in Phrygia. It was one of the first hotspots of Christianity outside of Alexandria and Antioch, Syria, is Phrygia. Phrygia is a big hotspot for early Christianity. That's where a lot of early Christianity takes off.
So this is Asia Minor-ish, correct?
Yes,
up here in the north, and
it's
Paul's
close to Nicaea,
letters,
very close to Nicaea, right below Nicaea in that region.
Paul's letters, just hinting at the Galatian letter where he's like, listen, if you're going to circumcise, if you're going to cut the tip, he says, cut the whole thing off. Now, there are scholars, and there are commentaries about this, who actually think this is a jab at the Attis cult, meaning Paul's aware of the competitive nature, or whoever wrote these letters, if you grant that they are Paul. They're competing with the Phrygian eunuch idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, to go back to what I was saying about Attis himself, I kind of went off on a detour there, but that's fine.
True.
Attis, okay, and finally, after that 3 days of mourning, after the castrations, then there would be called the Day of Rejoicing, which was March 25th. March 25th, everybody would start going crazy, ecstatic worship. And there's quotes from later sources. I'm admitting these are later sources, Firmicus Maternus, and there's a few others who say that. So, by the way, I forgot to mention, Hilaria isn't just for Attis. It was also for Osiris, and those two gods become linked together in late antiquity with Adonis and Dion and Bacchus.
Well, it says that here too, right?
It says it right there, yeah.
Yeah.
But those two gods, during this time of the year, the priests would come out on the 25th and they would announce, our God has been saved, and because of his sufferings, we are saved too. Now, I don't know if you want to show that quote from Firmicus Maternus. It's in the just to show them what I'm talking about.
For those who are just tuning in, you didn't see the complications I was having. I was struggling for my life trying to get these. There's a lot of URLs I have open, and Neal said, you look like, you don't even look like visible as a human on the other side of your camera.
It's like all fuzzy, but it's fine.
Bear with me here. I'm going to extrapolate these into a new box here. If you don't mind continuing what you were saying, Neal,
I'll continue talking about Attis.
And I'll find the Firmicus Maternus.
Now, in the myths of Attis, none of this is really present in the myths of Attis. In the myths of Attis, there's only a few surviving. One of them is from an author named Timotheus. There's another one from, I think his name is Hermodorus, I think his name is. I can't remember. It's actually an H. We have two surviving myths about Attis. Neither of them have anything about 3 days or resurrection. Those myths have Attis castrating himself, falls in love. Either he falls in love or is devoted to Cybele, the great mother, depending on what myth we're talking about. But either in both of the myths, he castrates himself, bleeds out, and dies. When Cybele sees him dead, she weeps over him, and then Zeus feels bad, gives him the boon of life. But he doesn't come back in a bodily form. He comes back as like a tree, and he just and then the tree just
agricultural.
It's agricultural. It's not at all like we get. It's not at all like we get in the later versions of the story. So I want people to realize this is why a lot of scholars are like hesitant to even think that the gospel authors are borrowing from the Attis myth, because the Attis myth itself doesn't have the 3 days mourning and resurrection. That's not there. It's only in the festival itself called the Hilaria. We need to make sure we separate those two, because people will be like, wait a minute, I read the Attis myth. I never heard anything about 3 days resurrection. And I'm telling you, you're right. It's not in the myth. It's in the festival. Why is it in the festival? I don't know. I have a hypothesis, but it's not founded on much evidence. It's just based on conjecture, educated conjecture, that there might have been another myth that we lost that might have had these traits. I can't prove that. We don't know. But your guess is as good as mine as why this festival had these traits. Some people think they're copying the Christians. However, I think that can easily be debunked and taken out of the realm of even being plausible, because we can anchor this. This is what I meant by anchor this. We know that Ovid, when Ovid during his Fasti, he's listing all the festivals month by month by month. January and February and March and April and May, this is what we do. And he mentions the Megalesia festival, which is in April. That's the only festival he mentions that has anything to do with Cybele or Attis. He does not mention the Hilaria.
It was book
and
5.
by the way, this is actually worth bringing up, because even in this period, there is still an idea of Attis suffering and Attis, the sacrifice of Attis. So it doesn't say anything about. Go ahead. You want to read this part?
No, yeah, I was going to just point this guy out. So we don't know who this guy is. Never heard of him, but he
reminds me of Tim O'Neill so much. Oh my God.
He's doing one of those.
It's like a new Tim O'Neill out there. He wrote this article this year, April 2025. It's so bad. This is one of the worst articles I've ever read in my life. He went. You can tell it's going in here. Go to the part where he writes about the Hilaria.
Yeah.
Let me demonstrate how bad he is. Now, I just kind of gave you a rundown what happens. He writes this: March 15th, bring in the reeds. March 22nd, parade a pine tree around like a float at the Macy's Day Parade. What do we do? Is it what did ChatGPT write this? March 24th, everybody's screaming, cut themselves. March 25th, Hilaria, hooray, you survived your own religious trauma. And here's what bothers me the most. Go down to his site, go to sources.
Yeah, this is important.
He cites Firmicus Maternus, but Firmicus Maternus is the one that says there's a resurrection and a 3-day motif. How are you citing sources that say the opposite of what you're saying? Oh my God, this bothers me. So now, this is like a horror. This is just a horrible art.
It is.
I don't understand this weird attitude that a lot of atheists hold of like wanting to debunk parallels between Jesus and other gods. I don't know what it is. I think Zeitgeist just did a lot of damage. Now everyone wants to. They want to look like look how smart I am and how above how much I understand things better than everyone else, and I understand that Zeitgeist is wrong, but like this is so wrong on so many levels. But
Decades wrote. Who is the moron that wrote this?
I want to know. I want to have debate with them or have them on and be like, what are you talking about? Let's go through your own sources and see what they say.
Check all of these. Yeah. By the way, we're going to read Walter.
And here's another part of another fallacious thing he says. If you want to go up here in this article real quick, go up.
Where do you want me?
He says that, keep going right here. He goes, let's see what the pagan sources say. Pliny, nope. Tacitus, hard pass. Pausanias, just a lot of scenic travel. Wait a minute. What do those three have to do with anything? Why would you pick those three? And second of all, imagine if I said this. All right. Now everyone knows. Let's say, for example, I said, Jesus never resurrect. Let's use Jesus for example. Everyone knows the Gospels say that Jesus died 3 days resurrected. Imagine if I said to you, "That's funny. I've checked the sources." And let me just think of quick 3 sources that don't mention Jesus at all. So we have let's think, contemporaneous. Pausanias never mentions Christianity. So what if I was just like, let's check the sources. Pausanias, nope. And then I was like, Cassius Dio, nope. And then I named a third one.
I don't know. Plutarch even does. Plutarch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Plutarch. Yeah. After the Gospels, never mentions them. Imagine if I said Plutarch, Pausanias, and I said, they don't say anything about Jesus resurrected. You'd be like, what are you talking about? It's in the gospel right here. Right. Why would you mention those 3 anyway? What do they have to do with anything? I just don't get it. I don't know. So
even his source though on Ovid, we went and looked at this source ourselves, and it's like, bro, you really do need to read this source for yourself. So we have Ovid here.
Good. And another thing, he goes, what do scholars say about this? He cites scholars who are not even specialists in Roman religion. Why didn't you talk about Robert Turkin, who literally tells us for an entire chapter in Cults of the Roman Empire?
Hold on, let me make it full screen.
Why didn't you mention Robert Turkin, one of the great scholars who writes about the Roman Empire, who literally tells us that Attis dies and resurrects after 3 days, and he says it was Claudius in the 40s
that implemented this festival.
Another one is Antonio Tripolitis, says the exact same thing. Why didn't he cite these scholars? Well, that wouldn't be good for his argument, right? People like this make me sick, dude. That really reminds me of Tim O'Neill, to be honest.
It's pretty annoying when we get constant reactions that are like that, where there's just dismissal. And so I'm reading this. We read Ovid, which I don't know if we have time to even read all these, honestly.
Well, just the part where it talks about Attis' suffering and his
Well, I know there's 3 different spots. This is in book 4 of Ovid's Metamorphosis. When I was silent, the Pierian goddess began to speak. In the woods of a Phrygian boy of a handsome face, Attis by name had attached the tower-bearing goddess. By the way, we're going to get into that too. I think we're going to need to show the goddess.
Magdalene. Magdalene means tower.
Yeah, so this might sound a little bit wild to some.
Oh yeah, that one. I don't take that one to the bank, but it's still interesting. I still bring it up as like a fun like. Who knows?
Well, that's dealing
and
with
look, that's the lady, that's the Black Madonna. Look, notice she has that crown on.
Yep.
And the images of Cybele, especially with the black Cybele, you want to pull that up, the black Cybele, she's got the crown on. And so like the Black Madonna idea was a thing in late Roman religion.
Yep.
Before the Christians.
There's another one. You can see the tower on her head.
She always has a tower every time. Cybele.
Yeah, we just wondered.
Now the other one wasn't just
speculative. Of course.
The other one is Artemis, Cybele, and Isis fused together. That's a late Roman Empire statue. Normally, Artemis would look like this, the old Artemis images. But when you see the black one, you know it's Roman, because the Phrygians or the Ephesians who worshipped Artemis, they had similar statues like this, but they weren't black; they were white. And this black one is like this early pagan form of the Black Madonna, where they fuse together imagery from Cybele, Isis, and Artemis, and you get this type of goddess in Apuleius's Golden Ass, where they start fusing goddesses together into one major goddess.
And
like
see all the breath?
Mother.
That's just fertility and like life-giving mother right here. But I love that tower idea that we speculate a little bit, wondering if Magdalene, I know this comes out of the Aramaic.
There is a city called Magdala. There is a city called Magdala. So,
but is that anachronistic though? You see what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
Are they naming this after the Hellenistic cult?
Yeah,
and these ideas. Who knows? You and me were there in the region.
Possible.
Anyway,
it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
But anyways, what does it say?
Says tower bearing goddess to himself by a chaste passion. She wished that he would be kept for herself and should guard her temple. And she said, resolve to be a boy forever. He promised obedience. And if I lie, quote he, may the love for which I break faith be my last love of all. He broke faith. From meeting the nymph Sagaritas, he ceased to be what he had been before. For that, the angry goddess wreaked vengeance. By wounds inflicted on the tree, she cut down the naiad who perished thus. For the fate of the naiad was bound up with the tree. Attis went mad, and imagining that the roof of the chamber was falling in, he fled and ran for the top of Mount Didymus. And he kept crying at one moment, take away the torches. At another, remove the whips. And of the swore that the Stygian goddesses were visible to him, he mangled too his body with a sharp stone and trailed his long hair in the filthy dust. And his cry was, I have deserved it. With my blood, I pay the penalty that is my due. Ah, perish the parts that were my ruin. Ah, let them perish. Still, he said. He retrenched the burden of his groin, and of a sudden was bereft of every sign of manhood. His madness set an example, and still his unmanly ministers cut their vile members while they tossed their hair. In such words, the Ionian muse eloquently answered my question as to the cause of the madness of the votaries. Okay.
Yeah, notice how his blood is the ransom. It's this, It's the theme you get in the Osirian and the Attis mysteries, and then obviously Christianity. The blood of Christ is the mystery. There was also the Torabolium that happened in the Great Mother mysteries, where the new initiates were literally washed in the blood of the bull. And what do you get this imagery in Revelation and John, and washed in the blood of the Lamb, the new saved by the baptism and blood of the Lamb. So that's idea. We want one's a lamb, one's a bull. Sure, they're not the same, but there's the same mechanics going on, the same magic blood type of imagery. So but let me point out, Ovid in that Fausti never talks about the Hilaria. He talks about Megalesia. Hilaria. Now, so then someone might say, well, then if Ovid doesn't know about the Hilaria, when did it start? Not much later. So here's the anchor. John the Lydian, if you want to pull up John, you want to pull up Lydian?
Did we have this? We have this quote up.
We have John the Lydian. John the Lydian, who is a late source, I think 4th century. Let me see.
This is it, Lytis, right?
Yeah, John Lydian.
59 on the 11th day.
Yeah, he's 5th century. He's way later. Okay, but here's the thing. We don't know when this festival started. John the Lydian, though, is the only source that actually tells us when this festival. You got to go down to where it says Claudius. Do a word search for. Oh, it's right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So he's talking about the festival right here, and he's talking about the calends of April. A pine tree would be carried on the Palatine by dendrophori, tree bearers. The festival was established by the Emperor Claudius, a man so in his judgments that he ordered a mother who was denying her own child to be married to him. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, the point is, this is the only source from antiquity who tells us who initiated the festival, Claudius. Now, Robert Turkin believes this source, even though it's late. Robert Turkin thinks there's good reason. He goes into the Attis dynasty, or I'm sorry, the Claudian dynasty.
I'm exiting these sources after we read them. Forgive me if you ask me to bring them back up. I'm trying to reduce my RAM being used on this computer because there's like 50 of these URLs.
Yeah.
Okay.
He says right here, page 44, he says, at all events, it was a Claudius who instituted and had inscribed in the Roman calendar, which after fashion opened the Holy Week of the god Attis, the entry of the tree.
I think we need to go through Robert.
Yeah, if you want to go to this part right now. If you want to go to that part right
bro.
now. And then he says, I really want to show them page 46 too. Okay. So you can go to that part where it mentions Claudius real quick.
Let me find the chapter because it opens exactly.
By the way, this is the authoritative book on Roman cults. This is the book. This is one of the best books out there. Next to Mary Beard's Religions of Rome. I would say between this book and Mary Beard is all you need. You can if you read this and Mary Beard, you'll be on your way. Mary Beard might be even better actually, but this is good for Attis stuff. He's really okay. So go down to where it talks about Claudius, if you don't mind.
All right, scrolling down here, and once we see that, we need to read. I think there's a lot here we should cover for the viewers.
Yeah,
to hear this brilliant mind.
Oh yeah, right where he mentions Claudius, he talks about the entire festival. It's perfect. It's a perfect place to start.
Okay, there he is, right there. So I'm hoping. However, although on the above-mentioned relief, Attis's cap symbolically crowns the summit of the temple, the castrated
I can't see it on your screen. I can't see it on your screen.
Is it not? You can't see.
Oh no! This is not the. Oh, that's page 44.
Well, I'm getting.
Go down.
Going
no. This is a good. No, I'm sorry. This is a good place to start. Okay.
Yeah. You see
so here. Let me start right here. This is where he explains why he thinks Lydian is right. John of Lydian, he thinks is right. That this started in Attis, and here's why. Go to where it says the grandson of Livia.
Okay, down.
Yeah.
Okay, bear with me.
Now remember this. People are gonna say, but Claudius is from the Julian Claudian dynasty. Wouldn't he be? No, he was adopted. Don't remember. All the first 12 Caesars are adopted, except for Titus Flavius, who let his son be the next emperor, and then his brother after that. But from Julius Caesar, who adopted Octavian, who became Augustus, and then Octavian adopts Tiberius. Tiberius adopts Caligula, who adopts Claudius, and here we are in the 40s. They're all adopted. So their system was not nepotism. Give it over to your son. Their system was who's the best that can rule, and it was right. So his family. Let me read this right now.
Yeah,
the grandson of Livia belonged to a family whose clan name was Appius Attis. Now remember, there's two names of Attis. One of them's Pappus, the other one's Attius. So either way, it works. Went back to the famous Sabine Atticlosis and recalled the very name of Attis, Papa. Claudius took great interest in the mysteries of Eleusis, which he tried in vain to bring across the herbs, and his erudition, encouraged by the historian Livy, had perhaps led him to read the work of Timotheus, that's one of the sources for the myth of Attis I mentioned earlier, on the religion of Pessinus, which is in Phrygia. That's where the black stone of Cybele was found or was worshipped. Big black cube called the Kaaba, actually cubed. I don't think it was called Kaaba, but that's what people think. People said that they think that it had something to do with it. Anyways, where was I?
Among the freedmen, I think
among the freedmen of the Greco-Oriental origin, whose influence and activities were growing stronger at the time of the imperial court, many came from Phrygia, where the assets of the imperial treasury were considerable. Apart from the palace and the civil service, Anatolians must have been numerous at Ostia. That's the city right next to Rome. It's like the same urban. It's part of Rome, Greater Rome, basically. It's the port city, Ostia, where the cult of Cybele would experience increasing success the following century. So now, before I continue, I just want to remember, we can safely anchor that this festival was happening in Rome and was well established in between Claudius and Antonius Pius in the 140s.
Got it.
Which is like it's 100 years, but what else happened in that period of time? The Gospels get written. Yeah, the rise of Christianity, the Gospels, everything. It's a really crazy time to anchor. And then why did I say Antonius Pius? He actually mentions here in the same book why. There's one of the few sources we have on the Hilaria is that Antonius Pius was, proceeding forth in the festivals. It was doing like
participating,
taking part of rites. And then Marcus Aurelius in the 160s adds a day to the festival. So we know it by then, it's automatic. We know for sure it's still going on. So by 160, this festival is already, they're adding days called the Lavatio, which means day of washing. And then last but not least, there's another source that mentions Commodus being attempted. There was an attempt on his life, an attempted murder during the Hilaria festival.
Perfect time to do it when everyone's
yeah. So we know that somewhere between the middle of the 2nd century back to Claudius, we can safely anchor this festival was going on. Right. So when people bring up how late these sources are, they'll go, Firmicus Maternus is 4th century, John the Lydius 5th century. We don't know what the hell's going on with this thing, and they just want to walk away from it.
Right.
But no, that's not true. The primary sources bring us way back to the middle of the 2nd century, and if not, even to the middle of the 1st century during the reign of Claudius. So that's important. Now, as we read this, remember, we're somewhere in that period of time when this festival is going on. That's all we know.
Okay.
So it says,
at all events,
it was apparently Claudius who instituted, had inscribed at the Roman calendar a ceremony which, after a fashion, opened the Holy Week of the god Attis.
Holy Week.
And the entry of the tree. Henceforth, on March 22nd, a brotherhood of woodcutters, or dendrophori, which traced its foundation to the 1st of August, Claudius's birthday, that's interesting, carried in procession to the Palatine Temple a pine tree felled in memory of the tree at whose foot Attis had destroyed his virility. This festival implies, at least part, that the cycle of celebrations which, in later calendars, mark the 2nd fortnight in March, for like the procession of the tree, the liturgically reenacted the phases that were indissociable from the foundation myth.
Okay, now, so notice that he's saying the foundation myth are being reenacted through the actual festival.
That's why I think there's a lost Attis myth that wasn't preserved for some reason that has these traits in them. That's what I think.
Okay.
I think Robert Turkin was alive. He just passed away a couple years ago. I think if he was alive, he probably would have. I think he would say something like that.
Okay.
Because I mean, what else? What else is he talking about here? The foundation myth. I mean, if you read Timotheus, you don't get these.
Well, you don't get the details of the 3 days and the.
No, you get him dying and you get him dying and coming back to life. That you do get,
right?
But you just don't get those festivals of the mourning and then rejoicing after 3 days.
Right.
Those are very peculiar, and they sound so Christian that people are convinced that it went the other way around, that they're borrowing from the Christians. But if you're going to say that, I want you to think about this. Think about the consequences of that. Christianity in the late 1st, early 2nd century was not well known. Celsus learned about it in the 2nd century, and he gets a lot wrong, but he's probably the most knowledgeable on Christianity in the 2nd century. Tacitus barely knows what it is. He gets the name Christian wrong. Suetonius barely knows what it is. Pliny the Younger, which now is under being under scrutiny by some scholars as being possibly forged.
Right.
Well, we don't have to assume that, right? Even if Pliny was true, he's just hearing about it for the first time. He doesn't people don't know what's going on. Christianity is not influencing Roman religion in the 100s to 140, let alone in the first century during the reign of Claudius, which Jesus dies on the cross in 33, and then Claudius is already making a new Roman religion based off that. No, that's so crazy. It didn't happen. But even later, even if we get into the 2nd century, it's still very unlikely that Christianity would be influencing Roman religion and what they're doing in Rome.
This is why I brought up to you one comment about that. Remember when you were delving into this Christmas debunking the whole thing that Christianity was copied by the Sol Invictus and the Invincible Sun, all this stuff. Like they were copying Christians, right? And you've been pushing against this and pointing out, no. It's more likely the other way around, or everybody was gravitating to this
idea,
this winter solstice, the sacred nature observation of a holy day by looking at the natural observations. Well, what the hell is equinox? And why is it Jesus is landing his literal resurrection is happening on Easter, the same time Attis' celebration of him dying? They're celebrating, they're flagellating, they're
March 25th is the Feast of the Annunciation.
Right.
And so that's the day Jesus is conceived. It's the same day. I mean, maybe it could be.
I know, but it's kind of
it's possible that they both are going and gravitating towards that cosmic alignment with the solstices and the equinoxes. That's very possible. That is more likely to me than pagans copying Christians.
Okay.
So because like I mentioned, Christianity is not popular. 5 to 10% of the population, even by the time we get to right before Constantine converts, Christianity is still 5 to 10% of the population. So in the 1st century, it's probably 2% or something. It's probably less than that. It's barely anyone's Christian yet. Yeah. 2nd century, now we're starting to grow. It grows incrementally. My point is, Christianity is not the big player.
I was just going to say Claudius is.
Yeah, the big player is Roman imperial cult religion.
Right.
Everyone knows, no matter what city you're in, whether you're in Alexandria, or you're in Antioch, whether you're in Phrygia, whether you're in Gaul, you know about Roman, you know about Saturnalia, you've heard of the Megalesia, you've heard about these festivals because they're happening in all the major cities. That's the big player. It's more, you have to remember, it's more likely that the influence is going in the direction towards Christianity than the other way around.
It makes more sense to me that the popular imperial propaganda that would be, hey, everybody, this is the holy day of this god Attis. Come on. And the fact that Claudius's name is related to,
he's from the family his dynasty is related to this Attis cult. So there's good reason to think that this festival starts during the reign of Claudius. Claudius was a big reformer of religion. I mean, if you look at all the history, if you read like 12 Caesars by Suetonius, all the Caesars are reforming religion all the time. But Claudius was really serious about this. He made a lot of big reforms of taking Phrygian religion and importing and Eleusinian mysteries. He wanted to bring those in there. He was trying to bring Eastern religions into Rome.
Right.
That was happening in the 1st century, big time. And so, yeah.
Okay. Want me to read or you want to continue?
Okay. On March 15th, the Brotherhood of Canaphori went in procession through the streets, carrying reeds cut from the banks of the Almo, leading a 6-year-old bull, which the high priest sacrificed for the fertility of the mountain fields. It is not certain whether the reeds were meant to recall the infancy of Attis, exposed on the banks of the Sangarius River, or his grandfather, or Yalos, or his infidelity to Cybele with the nymph. In the first instance, the festival would underline the solicitude of the mother for the child, since she had saved him from the water. This is like the very common motif that you get in Romulus. You get this in Moses. You get this in Mesopotamian stories with Sargon of Akkad. This is a very common motif of the child on the water being taken in by a new mother. Anyways, and this is in the case of the great mother finds him. And then it says, but the dalliance of the Phrygian shepherd with the daughter of the river, unleashing the wrath of Cybele, demanded all the resources of dramatic art. This began the 9 days of penitence. I already mentioned this. Look, he even says it like I do, a sort of Lent. People abstained from bread, pomegranates, quinces, pork, fish, probably wine as well. Only milk was drunk. Perhaps it was also a time of obligatory sexual continence. So, like, look, during our Lent is right before Easter. Their Lent was right before their Holy Week. It's pretty,
which is Easter.
Some things are lining up here, right? You can see them lining up. On March 22nd, a pine had been cut before the end of the night and a ram sacrificed, its blood bathing the roots of the tree. The felling ektome in Greek took place in a wood sacred to Cybele. The procession, Pompeii, went through Rome like a funeral cortege, the sound of canticles intoned by the dendrophori and probably taken up by the mass of worshipers thronging in the streets. And by the way, I was in Greece during the Holy Week, during Pascha, and they're doing this. They're in the streets. They're all making loud noises. They're all in a religious frenzy. This is how Orthodox Christianity operates. During the Holy Week, they do not mess around. I don't know why we don't do that here, but they do. And you go to Athens or any city in Greece during Pascha, and they are thrilled. They are in the streets. They are raging.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they're doing this. This is what they do. And it says, on the sanctuary was reached, the pine was exposed to the adoration of the crowds. An image of Attis had been attached to it. Think about this. They have a piece of wood with an effigy of Attis attached to the tree. I mean, like that imagery.
I know.
If you're a gospel author, you might think about this stuff when you're thinking about Jesus on the cross, right?
Right. They actually in Acts, it uses the Greek term for tree. That not only the quote from Paul where he talks about cursed is the man who's hung on a tree, but in Acts it says that he was literally put on a tree, if you will, hung on a tree. And so Attis is hung on a tree, decorated with violets that his blood had caused to grow, according to the legend. On that day, Dies Violae, people went to lay flowers on the tombs. The whole next day was given over to mourning, lamentations. On March 23rd, the Salii, priest dancers of the god Mars, went in. This is why I love this is why people like to compartmentalize Roman religion and go, well, the Salii did this, and these priests did this, and those priests did this, and the Flamen Dialis, the priest of Jupiter, did this. Actually, Roman religion was very unified in many ways. There's a lot of times they get together for festivals and did things together. As you can see here, the priest of Mars came out, and they went in procession sounding their sacred trumpets, which received their annual blessing on this day. Like Corybants, they leaped about, striking their shields. On March 24th, the Day of Blood marked the peak of the mourning cycle. The high priest, with his Gali, those are the eunuch priests, gave the signal for a wild dance around the sacred pine. He flagellated himself, and then a whip hung with knuckle bones to the sound of curving clarinets and cymbals. The timbrels were beaten furiously, but people also beat their naked breasts with pine cones. They cut their shoulders and arms with knives. They made their blood spurt over the tree and the altars, emitting screams and yells that were echoed in the crowd. But the feverish trembling seized those among the spectators who were suffering from the effects of ritual fasting and devotional stress. They entered the dance and beside themselves in paroxysms of frenzy slashed their testicles with a piece of broken glass or flint. In their turn, and I know this is no joke. This is a religious frenzy. And by the way, when I was watching the Pascha and I was in the church at 2 a.m, we went for 3 hours from 11 o'clock till 2 a.m. You and Steven?
People are rocking back and forth,
trance
in a religious frenzy. They were feeling it, and I love that stuff. I said to Steven, I said, I feel different about religion now, because this people came here today and they experienced something, and then they left. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. This is something. There's the realness is them, is what they're getting out of it.
Right.
Is the excitement. It's the. I don't know. I wish I can explain
That's
that better.
powerful. No.
Yeah.
I've been tracking you.
I looked around and I saw these people. They were in tears. You can just tell that this is what their lives were revolved around this stuff.
Yeah.
And it gives them purpose. So, anyways, let's piece of broke. So what should okay.
Paradoxons, I think you were
yeah. In their turn, they became Attides, basically the devotees of Attis.
Yeah.
After the emasculation, the lower bellies of the Galli were tattooed, which confirmed their adherence to the sacred slaves in the certain temples of the East.
Confirm their adherence to the goddess.
Oh, to the goddess, henceforth imprinted in their flesh, like the mark of the sacreds, the mark of the beast. By the way, early Christians did a mark around their ear. We know this because Hippolytus says the carpocrations at the Church of Alexandria, there was this thing happening where people were tattooing in their lower ear, right below their ear, to mark them as Christians. I don't know. I'm just pointing that out. Something I noticed. And then it says, like the mark of the sacred slaves in the temples of the East. Sometimes it seems gold leaf was applied to the healed wound of the mutilation. After cutting the tree on the third day, the holy ineffable harvest of Gallus was cut, and the Emperor Julian would write. This is in the 4th century. This is after Constantine. Emperor Julian, who tried to bring paganism back to Roman religion, he tried to get rid of Christianity. So he writes in his discourse on the Mother of the Gods, the pine festooned with strips of cloth and flowers was then buried, as Cybele had done with the corpse of Attis. On that day, the high priest had prayers said for the protection of the emperor and the empire. Tertullian made jeer at this very respectable Archigallus, who 8 days after the death of Marcus Aurelius I'm telling you, even the Christians knew this festival was going on in the middle of the 2nd century. And that's another source right there. Made libations of impure blood by ripping open his arms and ordering public invocations for an already dead sovereign, or wax ironical about Cybele and the oracles she inspired in her excited priest. In this regard, Montanism, Christians, this is a group of Christians in Phrygia, had same generally Phrygian roots. In fact, it is known that the disciples of Montanus, who, by the way, he hung out with Tertullian, there's even a source, I think it's Epiphanius, who says that Montanus baptized Tertullian. I don't know how true that is, but it's a rumor that was going around. Claim to prophecy in the name of the Paraclete, but their fast and hallucinatory ecstasies were somewhat akin to mother cult practices. It was not by chance that this heresy, this is about to get good right here.
Okay.
It was not by chance, but this heresy was playing havoc in the church as far as Lyon, at the very time when, in paganism, in the cult of Attis, was enjoying its greatest success. The funerary ceremonies of the Pine Attis were probably followed by a kind of vigil, which was distinct from the midnight celebrated on December 9th, 160, during the reign of Marcus. Yeah, in Lyon, for the consecration of the Archigallus. So we know. Like, remember my anchor. You got to remember at some point between 40 and 150, 160, even I would say before this. So I would say the 140s, because Antonius Pius was big in this. I would say let's just do 150. Somewhere in between middle of the 2nd century, middle of the 1st century, we're anchored right there. Okay. For the consecration of the Archigallus, we do not know what this liturgy consisted of. Notice how they use the term liturgy for this stuff too. It's very, very consistent with what we know. Anyways, a famous page from Firmicus Maternus, as we all know, is the big source on this, has been connected with the mother worship cult. The Christian pamphleteer recalls a night of prayers and lamentations chanted rhythmically in the shadows until the moment when a light shines. By the way, Stephen, if you're watching this, we and Stephen were in at midnight on Easter. So it was Saturday night going into Sunday morning.
In Greece.
Midnight. In the church in Greece, they turn off all the lights in the church. You can't see anything. Dark. And what is the priest of the church, the highest priest and all of his deacons? He lights up a flame. And everyone starts to cheer. And then all the deacons take their wax candles and they light off of that candle, and then that candle lights another candle, and they spread the lights around, and then they all go outside and they're all crying and freaking out. And I'm just thinking to myself, I already knew about this before I went to Greece.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is the Attis thing. I was like, this is the same thing they do in Attis. Anyways, I just want to make sure that point gets said.
That's powerful.
But here's the powerful part. The Christian pamphlet recalls a night of prayers with lamentations chanted rhythmically in the shadows of the monument. When a light shines, the priest then anoints the bosom of the worshipers attending, murmuring slowly. Remember, this is on the third day. Attis has been buried for 3 days. And this is what he says on the third day. Have faith, O believers. God is saved. And for us, salvation will emerge from his suffering. That's what the priest would say in the Osiris and Attis cult on March 25th. Right? Isn't that fucking crazy? No one
I mean, come on.
People do talk about it, but you would think more Bible scholars would be into this shit. They're not.
You would think this
Danny
would
Jones
raise...
asked Dan McClellan what he thought about Hilaria. And he was like, huh? He didn't even know what it was. He didn't even heard of it. What the fuck? Anyways, have faith, O believers, God is saved. And for us, salvation will emerge from his suffering. But what follows and the context plainly show that the ceremony must rather be connected with Osiris. On the following, and this is true, the Osiris cult this is what Firmicus says, the Osiris cult had the same chant too. On the following day, March 25th, the resurrection of Attis was proclaimed, at least as the 4th century texts tell us. But a bas relief of the Antonine era, 140s, remember I anchored that, of the Antonine era found at Ostia shows us beside the dead Attis at the foot of the pine, a little Attis standing in some sense reborn. This was so he's saying, so this is why I love
I'm going to search this while you're doing this because, dude, we didn't get this one before we did.
I don't know. I tried finding it too. I don't know. It might be hard. You might be able to ask ChatGPT if you can find that. Find the Ostia, Antonine era Ostia Attis. Type in that in. But this is why I love Robert Turkin, because here's what all these scholars are like. All right, yeah, Firmicus Maternus does say that during the Attis cult, he was dead for 3 days. They mourn for 3 days, and then they rejoice at the resurrection of the god Attis. But they all say this, and this is fine. This is fair. This is a fair thing to say. That source is 4th century. It's late. But then you get Turkin's like, yeah, I know it's late. Yeah, sure. But why is there a resurrection of, why is there a statue in Ostia of a reborn Attis? Like, he's like, I think we can anchor this thing into the late 1st, early 2nd century easily. And the sources say Claudius, don't forget from the get-go, Claudius instituted this festival. Go back while you're finding that. I'll read the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it gave me a few different images.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to find that.
Yeah, this is not.
I'm sure if we ask someone who knows Roman archaeology, we could probably find it.
Pat might know.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe he could find it. But
yeah,
let's go back. Just go back to that real quick. Yeah.
Okay. I'll write him.
So this was the day of the Hilaria, popular rejoicings. The first day when the day is longer than the night. Macrobius, Saturnalia, a festival of spring and life rediscovered in the time of Commodus, right after Marcus Aurelius, it's still in the 2nd century, 180. It would take on the air of an exuberant carnival behind a triumphal procession where, in the front of the idol of Cybele and the emperor, were carried the most prestigious works of art lent by the sovereign and the Roman aristocracy. Gold and silver wine bowls, candelabras, and statues. Knights and senators, freedmen, and dignitaries can be seen in procession, made up, masked and clad, the most unexpected disguises. Anyways, we get the point. But there's another source that says Severus Alexander on this day ate pheasant in one of the sources. So, and then look at Maternus, dressed as a soldier of the guard, thought he could assassinate Commodus in 187. Sorry. So the reason why these sources are important is because they're little bits of evidence that this festival was happening in the 2nd century. This isn't a 4th century festival. It just happens to be that the one source that really gives us the details is late. That does not mean this festival didn't occur until the 4th century. You can't just say this is a 4th century festival because the sources say that. because the source that we have is from the 4th century.
That would be
like saying
the archaeology, though, Neal. Your point stands as an earlier
the
evidence.
That would be like me saying that you can't say the Old Testament existed before the Dead Sea Scrolls, because that's the first time we get any physical manuscripts of it. Right, it's like, no, you examine the Dead Sea Scrolls and it's got a bunch of evidence about kings of Israel from way back into the Iron Age. So we have to look at the evidence, not just when we find the first source of it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
What else are we missing? So that's what happened. So the big thing to take away from is you have a period of Lent. You're burying Attis on a pine tree in the ground. 3 days later, rejoicing and the priest goes, "We are saved because our God is saved." And like, it's pretty cool, isn't it?
I think so. I think this is very telling. He's got more here. I know he gets into more of this. I don't know if you want to keep going past the 25th and move on into the other. I know
there's. Let me think. Yeah, we could. You want to? Yeah, go ahead. You want to read it? Want to start reading some?
Let me see if there's anything here. Let's just scroll down a little
bit. That's all the major parts.
Yeah. So he's talking about Nero. So we are not sure whether it was during the April spectacles, but Nero put himself on stage to warble lament for Attis.
Lament for Attis. Do you see what I'm saying? That's in the 60s.
Right.
That's before the Gospels.
Exactly.
So that's a really important source that you brought up there. Why are they lamenting Attis during this festival of these traits? If these details of the festival, now that is we don't know about. That doesn't say about 3 days. The 3 days thing, I'll be honest, the 3 days thing, the first source we get about the 3 days thing is that 4th century source.
Firmicus Maternus.
Yeah, right. I'm just being completely honest here.
But the festival itself reflects that 3-day motif with the day they begin the lament. It's just like Good Friday. Good Friday, they're sad. They're remembering the death of their Lord. Then Good Sunday or the resurrection happens, and they're celebrating.
Not only that, this is another thing I want people to realize. All the primary sources that there's not a lot. There's 2, I think, that say when this festival started. Point to Claudius. There's not a single primary source that says this came later. The idea that this came later is just people going, well, Firmicus Maternus wrote in the 4th century, so why are we looking at this? But no, there's no one from antiquity who comes along and says, no, Lydius is wrong. This festival came way later. Nobody. So we have to take into account, even though the evidence is small, all of it points to the 1st century, if not early 2nd.
Right. And that's why this guy is like, you don't get caught up in, I mean, look at anyone's arguments, but like what
this guy, oh my God, I would love
whoever
to find
this is. This is something else. Okay. Yeah. I think, look, my recommendation would be to tell everybody, get this book, The Cults of the Roman Empire.
Oh, and then pull this one up.
Okay,
Antonia, let's see what Antonia says.
I'm gonna just close out Trig v. Mettinger right now. I was gonna get into that. We don't have time. The Golden Bow is worth bringing up. Okay, here we are. Antonia.
This is Antonia. She's a great scholar, by the way.
Is there this is
a great book. Like Ronald Hawk from University of Southern California rated this book as like one of the great mystery cult books of our time. Anyways,
so she does talk Attis.
Yes. And can you do me just type in Claudius, because I just want people to realize every scholar who studies the Attis cult has been saying the only scholars that poo-poo this, like Triv, what is his name? Triv Mettinger.
Yeah.
He's not a specialist in the cult of Attis. Why is everyone citing him for his? He's one of the scholars that go, oh, Maternus is late, so ignore this. Well, what about John the Lydian? What about Claudius? What they don't mention this. They just go, oh, Maternus, he's late, and they move on. And it's like, but like, fine, I don't care. That's a fair point. But why would I want to listen to you when there's actual scholars that are studying this as their specialization, and they're all saying this? So here's what he says: Romans could not serve as priests, play the sacred instruments, or take part in the orgies. All this changed beginning with the time of Claudius. During the reign of Claudius, the cult gained new vigor and was one of the most popular and most favored of the foreign cults.
By the end
of the 1st century CE, its popularity had spread throughout the Western world in Asia Minor. And then it says like the restrictions on the Roman participation were removed. Roman citizens, both men and women, took part in the processions, and Roman men were permitted into the ranks of the Galli. In addition, although the Megalesia continued until April, a new annual cycle of the events was established by Claudius. Okay,
and he has footnotes, I'm sure.
Another expert telling us this. I know your audience loves hearing. They just want to know if there's an expert agree, and that's fair. They should. As a layperson, you should want to know: do experts agree? The answer is yes. It's a resounding yes. The new festival, which was held March 15th to 27th, introduced Cybele's consort Attis into the Roman cult. It is thought that this festival was the original Phrygian cycle initially, ignored by the Romans. From that time on, Attis was honored as a divinity together with Cybele. The significance of the rituals performed during this festival is not certain, and many hypotheses exist. The interpretations presented here are the most widely accepted and found in early literary works, artifacts, inscriptions. The festival began on the Ides of March 15th. By the way, this is all going to be the same.
We're repeating what our last scholar over here.
Just go down a little bit. No, go back. I just want to read one part of what she says because this is pretty big. It says right here, it says, this is not considered the initiation rite from the form of sacrifice of the goddess. March 25th, the day of joy, Hilaria, was a commemoration of the triumph of day over night after the spring equinox. Now, that's a major thing because no matter where you want to go with this, no matter where you want to date this, at the end of the day, if you're thinking, how do we know that the early 1st century version was like the 4th century version? Well, did the equinox ever change? The equinox is on the same day.
Right.
It's a fixed calendar. So remember that. The Romans have a fixed calendar. They always celebrated on these days. It didn't matter where the sun really was in the sky. They didn't really care. And by the way, by this time, it wasn't that Caesar just fixed the calendar only half a century, or only like less than a century before this. So the equinoxes were pretty good lined up at this point. Anyways, the part that I want to read is right here. In the reign of Antonius Pius, 138 to 161, this day became one of the main Roman festivals. The day following the Hilaria was a day of rest, and the festival was concluded on March 27th with the Lavatio that gets added during this time. The ceremonies bathing of Cybele's silver statue in the Alma River. Now, there we go. This is what I mean when I say we can anchor this between Claudius and Antonius Pius. Because we have a primary source that tells us Antonius Pius was celebrating this festival, and he adds a day to it called the Day of Washing. Him and Marcus Aurelius did it together. So
I wanted to bring the Golden Bow in, or the Golden Bow by Fraser, just to point out he's an OG on this.
Yeah, let's read some Fraser.
Dude, it's super okay. I'll share what I got here. I did not have a specific source. This is such a big encyclopedia of information. What I did is you can download this actually for free PDF online and then just search Attis. There's 85 mentions. The first 4 are in where he's in the chapters and stuff. But we could go in Moons, the Fair Youths, Attis. I mean, he literally, I don't know. I didn't have anything particular, but let's just go to I don't want to read a certain source because it's too much material. Human representatives of Attis. I would rather.
There's a lot about Attis in here.
Yeah, I wanted to read. I thought I closed that.
Why don't you do a word search for Hilaria? Why don't you do a word search for Hilaria in
Golden Bow?
In Fraser, yeah. See what he says about the Hilaria itself.
Hilaria. There's one.
That's it?
Okay, here we are. Yep.
There it is. Yeah.
That's it. The celebration took form of a carnival. It was the festival of joy. Hilaria, universal license prevailed. Every man might say and do what he pleased. People went about the streets in disguise. No dignity was too high or too sacred for the humblest citizen to assume with impunity. In the reign of Commodus, this is that cool one. In the reign of Commodus, a band of conspirators thought to take advantage of the masquerade by dressing in the uniform of the imperial guard, and so mingling with the crowd of merrymakers to get within stabbing distance of the emperor. But the plot miscarried. Even the stern Alexander Severus used to relax so far on the joyous day as to omit a peasant. Sorry.
By the way, the day of rejoicing and day of blood is right before that, and this is the paragraph on the left, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, on the paragraph on the left.
Look,
go up a little bit.
Look at this though. Look at the tomb. Shown in the darkness, the tomb was opened.
Start up there. Yeah.
Parallel of these Syrian devotees confirms the view that a similar worship of Cybele, the sacrifice of virility, took place on the day of blood at the vernal rites of the goddess, when the violets supposed to spring from the red drops of her wounded lover were in bloom among the pines.
By the way, when I was in Greece, there was a thing that happens during the springtime in Greece where these little red violets would pop up in the grass everywhere in Greece. It only happens for like a few weeks, and I was there during that time. So everywhere I go, everywhere I was traveling, whether I was in, Stephen remembers this too, everywhere we went, we just saw these little violets popping out of the ground because it was springtime. And the ancients thought this was like the blood of Adonis or the blood of Attis.
Got it.
So this is what he's talking about. Go ahead.
So he says, supposed to spring from the red drops of her wounded lover were in bloom among the pines, like you just described. Indeed, the story that Attis unmanned himself under a pine tree was clearly devised to explain why his priest did the same beside the sacred violet-wreathed tree at his festival. At all events, we can hardly doubt that the day of blood witnessed the mourning for Attis over a effigy of him, which was afterwards buried. The image thus laid in the sepulchre was probably the same which had hung upon the tree. Throughout the period of mourning, the worshippers fasted from bread, nominally because Cybele had done so in her grief for the death of Attis, but really perhaps for the same reason which induced the women of Haran to abstain from eating anything ground in a mill while they wept for Tammuz. To partake of bread. God, I love how far back and how deep he's going into that.
This goes back to Ishtar mourning for
ancient.
This is where this all comes from.
To partake of bread or flour at such a season might have been deemed a wanton profanation of the bruised and broken body of the god.
And there's a hymn. I forgot what the name of the hymn. It's an old Mesopotamian hymn where Ishtar is beating her breast and crying and ripping out her hair over Dumuzi. And it's like this is that taken in a new form, because the Sappho, one of the myths of Adonis is from Sappho's poems, and it's almost like complete copy of the myth of Ishtar, but it's Venus beating her breast and ripping out her hair over Adonis. So you can see how Dumuzi is inspiring all these later gods.
Or the fast may possibly have been a preparation for a sacramental meal. But when night had fallen, the sorrow of the worshippers was turned to joy, for suddenly a light shone in the darkness. The tomb was opened. The god had risen from the dead. And as the priest touched the lips of the weeping mourners with balm, he softly whispered in their ears the glad tidings of salvation. The resurrection of the god was held by his disciples as a promise that they too would issue triumphant from the corruption of the grave. On the morrow, the 25th day of March, which was reckoned the vernal equinox, the divine resurrection was celebrated with a wild outburst of glee at Rome and probably elsewhere. The celebration took form of a carnival. Anyway, that's Golden Bough. I highly recommend everyone download that. It's a great read. Then there's Mother of the Gods, which we saw in one of the footnotes that we were actually trying to dig into.
This is Turkin's footnote.
Hilaria is mentioned 12 times. So the day of rejoicing. This is another scholar.
Yeah. I forgot why we brought this one on.
I can't remember.
There's probably something cool in here though.
Okay, well, we'll move on. We'll move on for now.
Yeah.
We had this right here, Roger Pierce.
Yeah, I love Roger Pierce, by the way. I read his blogs all the time. I'm constantly running into his articles when I'm doing my research because he's all over the same places I'm at. So it's cool to see that. Like when I'm researching something for a video and I'll pop up and all of a sudden Roger Pierce has a whole article on the subject that I'm talking about. Like, oh, sick.
This is one by Roger Pierce that's worth it. Hilaria was the name of different festival celebrated in the Greek world, meaning in Crete, which were officially ordered also at happy events such as the occasion of a prince. No one was allowed to wear mourning clothes on these days, and after various peace offerings, all gave themselves up to rejoicing their sources. Also in the cult of Isis, there was Hilaria Day on 3rd of November. But in Rome, this name was used mainly for the Hilaria of Magna Mater, which took place on March 25th. In Asia Minor, meaning Hierapolis, Damascus, etc.
Asia Minor would be Turkey.
Yeah, I'm just reading the sources that are mentioning it. As in Rome, they were one of the principal feasts of the year. Wearing reeds, guests gathered for happy grinding, and there was a large procession where, in addition to ceremonial spear carriers, also comedy masks appeared, playing all kinds of jokes. I remember why I wanted to have what's his name source up.
Roger Pierce?
Nope. It was the one that we were saying wasn't going to be agreeing, or at least you thought he wouldn't, but I actually think he would.
Who?
I'm pulling it up. Trygve Mettinger.
Oh yeah, Trygve Mettinger.
He said something really good though, dude.
I'm not saying he's all that bad. I just think his conclusion that I think he even thinks I don't know if he thinks they're borrowing from the Christians, but he basically comes away with it as it's such a late source. Forget it.
Look at this.
It's just fine. There's probably some great stuff in here. I'm not saying it's not.
Oh yeah. I just want to show the audience this. Okay,
he's not a fan of. No. He's actually. He's fair about James Frazier.
Right.
He's not a hater, but he doesn't agree with them. That's for sure.
He's more modern scholarship, right?
Yeah.
But look at what he says in the Golden Bow, 3rd edition, which is the later edition or one of the later ones, which is an elaboration on his 1906 book or work. James G. Frazier presented.
Notice how he gives him the credit of being a 20th century book, but everyone else wants to call him a 19th century book because they want to. It's just a little jabs like that bother me.
Yeah, and especially once you read it, you get a little bit close to Frazier once you read him. Presented the fascinating trinity of Adonis, Attis, and Osiris. This fourth part of his great work is obviously a follow-up on the volume 3 entitled The Dying God, in which he discusses the killing of the divine king and the death and resurrection of the corn spirit. Adonis is to Frazier the paramount example of the dying God. Frazier states his theory bluntly and unguardedly. So he goes on to explain too. I thought it was really cool where he's describing the ancient Israelite kings were seen as earthly divinities, and how the euhemerized form of the agricultural mythic deity that dies and rises would be in the king himself. So he sees Attis and all these dying and rising motifs in the kings who also of Israel.
In Babylon, they had a ritual of a mock king that would be dressed in purple robes and given a crown, and they would kill him, sacrifice him. Human sacrifice. Forgot the name of it, but it's one of those. It's ancient Babylonian mock king ritual. It's in Frazier too.
Did you want to read that Diodorus Siculus thing too?
Because somebody asked you, is there any pre-Christian sources that we know for sure? Not like, can we guess it's Claudius? And it turns out Diodorus does say some interesting stuff. And this is only a few decades before Claudius.
You read it.
This is 30 BC.
This is it.
This is okay. Just remember, this is between 30 and 40 BC, something like that. We don't know exactly when he wrote, but he died right around the time that Augustus became emperor. Right around, because he writes about Caesar and Brutus and all that, and then his history just stops. So he probably died right around the time of Augustus. And so this is only a few. This is half a century before Claudius, right?
Right.
Or like maybe a little more than that. It says Cybele, the myth records, having arrived at full womanhood, came to love a certain native youth who was known as Attis, but at a later time received the appellation Pappus.
Papa, remember Papa?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's another thing. We got to go to the Nicene preacher. I forgot about that. That'll be after this.
Okay.
And this is a huge part of the evidence that I forgot to mention. Oh well, people are still here.
Okay.
With him, she consorted secretly and became with child. At about the same time, her parents recognized her as their child. Consequently, she was brought up in the palace, and her father welcomed her at the outset under the impression that she was a virgin. But later, he learned of her seduction. He put to death her nurses and Attis, as well and cast their bodies forth to lie unburied.
Notice this is a different myth than the earlier.
They're all different. Yeah, that's
so you're saying there's probably a missing myth.
That's why I think there's different myth. Yeah.
Okay.
And so to lie unburied, where Cybele, they say, because of her love for the youth and grief over the nurses, became frenzied and rushed out of the palace into the countryside, and crying aloud and beating upon kettle drum. It sounds like Ishtar. She visited every country alone with her hair hanging free. And Marsyas, out of pity for her, that's a satyr, like Pan, out of pity for her plight, voluntarily followed her and accompanied her in her wanderings because of the love which she had formerly borne her.
Mm-hmm.
When they came to Dionysus in the city of Nysa,
that's Scythopolis. That's right there near.
That's one of the locations of Nysa. Yeah, they found there Apollo, who was being accorded with high favor because of the lyre, which they say Hermes invented. Notice how it's all coming. All these gods are coming together into one myth. Though Apollo was the first to play it fittingly, and when Marsyas strove with Apollo into a contest of skill, the Niceans had been appointed judges. The first time Apollo played upon the lyre without accompanying it with his voice, while Marsyas, striking upon his pipes, like Pan, amazed the ears of his hearers by their strange music, and in their opinion far excelled by reason of his melody the first contestant. But since they had agreed to take turn, where's the part about Attis's suffering or whatever?
Here's another section.
Yeah, okay, you're in the wrong part. But the myth goes on to say a pestilence fell upon human beings throughout Phrygia, and the land ceased to bear fruit. And when, unfortunately, here's that Lent, mourning, fasting, right? This is the agricultural layer of that. Remember, you do what you mock you mock nature. So you rejoice when nature blooms back, and you mourn when it's all dead.
When it's dying, yeah.
So notice how the myth's talking about a pestilence. The land ceased to bear fruit. And when the unfortunate people inquired of the god how they might rid themselves of their ills, he commanded them, it is said, to bury the body of Attis and to honor Cybele as a goddess.
So there's a death burial.
Consequently, the physicians, since the body had disappeared, in
translation fable,
made an image of the youth before which they sang dirges, and by means of honors in keeping with his suffering, propitiated the wrath of him who had been wronged. And these rites continue to be formed down to our lifetime.
Come on, bro.
This is before Claudius. 1st century BC, we have a straight up myth of Attis dying, and then people mourning over Attis,
burying
rituals,
his body goes missing,
and he saves them.
Come on.
So the myth is there. It's just being told by Diodorus.
And there must have been probably even more standard understanding of a myth that correlated with the festival more. But that's why we had to read this, because the guy that was writing that article, which made no damn sense.
Yeah. He didn't mention Diodorus, and why did he mention Pausanias, Pliny, and who was the other one? Why those guys? You're just gonna list 3 random sources because they don't mention Attis? Why didn't you mention Diodorus?
Right.
So people like that are like so stupid, dude. this one doesn't have the elements of a 3-day motif, but it had the sufferings, the death, and the salvation there. It's all there.
Exactly.
All the elements are there way before Christianity even existed.
I wanted to show this too, just for our viewers to see that they found a 1st century Roman throne discovered. It's made of wood. The year 79 buried.
This is Herculaneum.
Yep, Mount Vesuvius, and it is the characters Attis and Dionysus.
This is
as
recent.
well
we just
as
found this.
Pine cones and phalluses. Now, if that doesn't give you resurrection symbolism,
it is.
I don't know what will. Where is the images? Here it is.
The myth of Osiris has to do with a raised up phallus. That's what that means.
This was the wooden part of the actual throne where Attis and Dionysus are seen. And of course, this has already been covered by academics. 79, 1st century. This is a decade after Nero was crying over Attis's death.
But that's when you can date it to at the end when it got buried.
Right.
It might be older than that.
Well, I'm sure it is.
The Vesuvius erupted in 79. So I doubt it was created right that day. Like it might be 10 years old, you know?
Yeah.
It might be from 69 or something, you know, who knows?
Yes, this ancient Roman wood and ivory throne has been unearthed. Let me zoom in. I figure, and then we can get to your Nicene.
Yeah, the Nicene. You got that's gonna be good. The kicker. That's the kicker. Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be the closing, I think, source for now. And we can always do a round 2 on this. I just don't want to keep you too long, bro. And then we'll take the super chats. An ancient Roman wood and ivory throne has been unearthed at a dig in Herculaneum. Italian archaeologists said on Tuesday, hailing it, and this is 2007. So it's been around for a while. Most significant piece of wooden furniture ever discovered there. The throne was found during an excavation of the Villa of Papyri. Let's just scroll down. The name of the villa derives from the impressive library containing thousands of scrolls of papyrus discovered buried under yards, meters of volcanic ash after Vesuvius erupted on August the 24th in 79. Restoration of the throne is continuing. With restorers painstakingly trying to piece back together parts of the ceremonial chair. While other wooden objects have been dug out in the nearby Pompeii, experts have never before found such a significant ceremonial piece of furniture. Previously, such pieces have only been observed in paintings or made of marble. The find of an ancient wooden furniture is not an absolute novelty in Herculaneum or Pompeii. Where's the mention of Attis? Okay, here it is. Little is known about how the throne would have been used, but the elaborate decorations discovered on the chair celebrate the mysterious cult figure of Attis. The most precious relief shows Attis, a life, death, rebirth deity, collecting a pine cone next to a sacred pine tree. I mean, bro, the cult of Attis is documented to have been strong in Herculaneum during the first century.
AD. Yeah, I'm telling you. That's why when I hear people say, they just kind of wave it off because they'll go, "Oh, Firmicus Maternus is the only source we got. It's 4th century. What are we talking about here?" No. Well, you clearly just don't know the evidence. You clearly just don't know the scholarship. When you say that, you give yourself away. You're not reading the material on this. Nope. This is why I said in the offset, we cannot know for certainty if Christians are borrowing in the Gospels, for example, of the 3-day, that Jesus dies for 3 days and resurrect. We don't know for sure if they borrowed that from Attis.
Right.
But it's plausible. It might not be likely. We might not be in the, I have my favorite chart that I made where I go from unlikely to likely to probable to certain. Like I have that little 4-prong chart. Remember I told you about that? Mm-hmm. Well, I would put this in between probable and likely. That's where I'm putting it. Now, it's not unlikely. It's at least likely. It might not be probable. I might not be betting on this, but I'm gonna say it's very possible. It's very likely that this started during the reign of Claudius, or it started in Claudius, and then you start getting the motifs by the time you get to Antoninus Pius. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean,
changes are being made constantly to this festival all the way up to the 4th century. True.
It's an evolving cult, but the motif of death, suffering of some sort, and rebirth.
That's there.
That's there, man.
That's there from the beginning. That's there from diet. That's there before the festival even started.
Way back in the 4th, 5th century.
Yeah.
BCE. So it just takes a new spin, different story, different myth, and how it gets practiced and celebrated is different over time. Yeah. Especially by the time Claudius implements it. So
now we're going to get to the best evidence of all. So people are going to say, how do we know Christians are even into this stuff? Right. How do we know, another thing, how do we know this doesn't, not even Turkin or Tripolitis even talks about this. I think this needs to be paid attention to more because the Naessenes, the Phrygian Christians that living in Phrygia, are identifying Jesus as Attis, as the new Attis, as we're about to show you right now. Let's pull it up.
All right.
And this tells us, put me back on for one more second.
Look at you.
What you're about to see right now is evidence that at the very least, in the middle of the 2nd century, Christians were identifying Jesus with Attis, which is more evidence that the Attis celebration of the Hilaria had these traits that were so similar to Christianity. At the very least, in the middle of the 2nd century, they were there. And you're about to see now. Okay.
Just so we're on the same page, and I want you to help me find the keyword. This is written by Clement, or is this?
No, this is written by Hippolytus.
Hippolytus.
So right around
he is writing against other Christians. So you have to understand, this isn't a jab. Like, I'm not writing to the literal like Attis cult members. He's writing to Christians who are actually doing this with Attis. Okay. What am I searching?
And so Hippolytus is writing this in the early 200s, first decade of the 200s.
Don't look up Attis, right?
Well, Attis is gonna be all over it. This is such a big document. Wait a minute, that might be right where we got to go. Let me see.
There's 7 mentions of Attis.
Yeah, he's all over. This is all about, well, because this is okay. Let me just say something real quick. Hippolytus is writing this in the early 3rd century, but he's writing about a guy who's already dead, called the Nicene preacher, who lived in Phrygia in the middle of the 2nd century. So 150, 160, right around there. And this guy thinks that Jesus is the fulfillment of Attis and Osiris and Adonis and Dionysus. Now let me just do let me see. Can you scroll down?
Yeah. You want me to go to the next one or just keep scrolling?
Yeah, keep going. I'm just going to tell you, keep going. Let me see. Let me do.
They're down a little ways. There's the next mention. Emasculated.
Yeah. Okay. Let me do this. Do a word search. Do a word search for
Mighty Ray Hell Attis Gloomy.
Here we go. This is it. Okay. Here's the hymn. Now, this Nicene preacher wrote this hymn. What he did was he took the Homeric hymn to Attis and he attributes it to Jesus. So he says right here, Jesus, whether you are the race of Saturn or happy Jupiter or mighty Rhea, hail Attis, gloomy mutilation of Rhea. Assyrians style you thrice-longed Adonis. All of Egypt calls you Osiris, celestial horn of the moon. Greeks denominate you wisdom. Samothracians, Adam. That's why there's a god named Adamus. That's why that's there.
Okay.
He's just, I guess, the Nicene preacher thought Adamus was Adam.
Got it.
It's in here. Haemonians, Corybos, and them Phrygians name you at one time Papa, a corpse, God, fruitless, ear of grain. And then you can see that down on the bottom, he says, you are Bacchus, shepherd of brilliant stars. And then he says, okay, so he does this thing where he equates Jesus with Attis and these other gods, not just Attis. And then he says, on account of these such reasons, he's talking about the Phrygian, these Nicenes constantly attend the mysteries called of the Great Mother. They're going to the Hilaria. These Christians are going to the Hilaria to watch the Hilaria because they think they're watching the Christian mysteries. Look at this. Supposing especially that they behold by means of the ceremonies performed there the entire mystery. For these have nothing more than the ceremonies that are performed there, except they are not emasculated. They merely complete the work of the emasculated. For with the utmost severity and vigilance they enjoin on their votaries to abstain as if they were emasculated from intercourse with a woman. The rest, however, of proceeding of these observed in the mysteries, as we have declared at some length, they follow just as if they were emasculated persons, and they do not worship any other object but Nos, the serpent. And by the way, these are the Christians who thought that Moses hanging up that John quote, just as you lift up the serpent in the desert, the Son of Man must be lifted up. They love that shit. These Christians love that the quote. Anyways, Nos
is it your logo like in the vein of this?
No, that's Abraxas.
Okay, I thought there was a serpent in there. Okay, never mind.
The Nos is the serpent whom, from the word Nos, Nasin, says they are all under heaven are denominated temples naos. All right. Anyways, the point of this is the Hippolytus is saying that the Phrygian Christians called the Nicenes were encouraged by the Nicene preacher to go and attend the Hilaria in Rome because the mysteries of Attis are just the mysteries of Christ.
Yep.
If that doesn't tell you all you need to hear about all of this, or at least by the time in the middle of the 2nd century, there were Christians in Phrygia who thought Christ was the fulfillment of the Attis mystery. One more thing I want to show you. We'll go back to that same page real quick.
Okay.
Do a word search for Eleusinian. So I'll tell you how to spell it.
Eleusinian.
Eleusinian. Here we go. This is the Christ. This is the Nicene preacher who says this. He says, in all that have been generated is the portrayed Son of Man from the unportrayable Logos. This, he says, is the great and unspeakable mystery of the Eleusinian rites. Hua, kua, as they say in Greek. And he affirms that all things have been subjected unto him. And this is that which has been spoken. Their sound has gone forth unto all earth. He cites Romans. So you know these Christians are no joke. They know Romans. Yeah. It's the middle of the second century. Just as it agrees with the expressions, Mercury waving his wand guides the souls, but they twittering follow. I mean, the disembodied spirits follow continuously in such a way as the poet, by his imagery, delineates. And as when in the magic cave's recess, bats humming fly, and one drops from ridge of rock, and each to other closely clings.
Who's the poet who wrote that? I need to find out. Let me see.
That I think is Orpheus, I believe. But the Nicene preacher is the one who's saying this.
I know. I'm just curious to know. That tells you they're educated.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Look that up.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. Okay, go ahead.
The expression rock, he says, he uses of Adam. This, he affirms, is Adam, the chief cornerstone, become the head of the corner. For that in the head of substance is the formative brain from which the entire family is fashioned. Ephesians 3:15. This is a fucking real theologian right here.
They think it might be Homer. It's an anonymous author, but they think it might be Homer. Dude.
That's cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I thought it was Orpheus, but I was just guessing, so I don't know.
Either way, yeah, it's cool.
And then he said, so look, if this guy is poetic, he's mixing together paganism and Christianity in a very poetic, awesome way. I like this type of shit right here. I think, and by the way, even Hippolytus admitted in this document, somewhere in here, he admits that the Nicene preacher was getting people to come to Christianity more than anyone else. He was super popular. Yeah, he was super popular in Asia Minor. He was a big fucking deal. And so I was telling Stephen Boyce this. I was like, even if you think this dude's a heretic, which you have every right to, he's way off. He's way off of orthodoxy.
Or what they,
But you have to give him credit for turning the pagan world into a Christian one. He was one of the big players in that second century shift that was happening.
I love that, dude. I tell you, one of my things I always told people, if I went back and wanted to play in the Christian sandbox ever, like it would require me having a much better understanding than the demons long ago mimicked Christ bullshit. You know what I mean? Yeah. It would be much better for me. It'd be like, no, actually, I think if anything, all creation is pointing to the ultimate one. And therefore all civilizations, all cultures, all cults are technically shadows of the true nature, which is why we find so much of Christ in all of these various different myths that have parallels. That would probably be my approach, but I think that they had a much better business model for the Greco-Roman world. I don't think that Christianity would have gone as viral if there weren't as many people accommodating the Greco-Roman.
And that's what
language.
the Dead Sea Scroll, or not the Dead Sea Scrolls, what am I talking about? The Greek magical papyri. If you don't have this, you should get a copy. This highlights why someone like a Nicene preacher would be so popular. Because these are not church texts. This is not the high priest of the Eleusinian mysteries writing this. This is not Plutarch. This is not highly educated. This is from the everyday Joes, the people that were on the streets, people working, the fishermen, the random people, barely, because their Greek sucks. Their Coptic is not good. There's some Aramaic they're not good. They're not educated. The people that are writing this stuff. This is not even a real book. This is a collection of inscriptions and papyri that have been found over mostly in Egypt, but other places too, and put together into a collection called the PGM. And what you find in here is you find all these magic rituals, and it's like They don't. There's no to these people. They don't see Christianity as separate from paganism. They have Christ next to Osiris in here.
Right.
They have Abraxas next to Yahweh. They actually call Abraxas Yahweh. They call him Yahweh. Yah-oh. They have Moses next to Kronos and Zeus. They're mixing everything together. So that's why, and this is the average people. This is how they were in the early first couple centuries. They didn't care about dogmas. They were just doing what they wanted. They were like New Agers. They were like you know how the New Agers are? They're just mixing everything. Buddha and Jesus holding hands. That's how these people were.
I'll tell you, I cover, there's a section in this documentary, and you and I do this all the time with our documentaries. Yeah. There's a section in this documentary that I did where I cover the PGM and comparing Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, well, really all the Gospels, to the magical papyri and point out the parallels between him, as many thought he might have been a magician, specifically using the works of what is his name? Jesus the magician author.
Yeah, that's what's his name?
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I can't think. I don't know. Maybe there's a spell on us right now. Someone in the chat's got witchery going on.
Oh, it's he's one of the translators of this. I should be able to look it up. It's
someone in there help me out.
It is Morton Smith.
Morton Smith.
He's and by the way, Morton Smith is one of the translators of this text.
That's
right here.
Probably why
him and John Scarborough, Amun's professor, Amun Hillman's professor, translated this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of a big deal.
That's Amun's doctor fodder.
Gotcha.
John Scarborough. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
He's so we got to get. He was a big deal. He was a huge, big scholar. Wisconsin University.
Let's get.
Listen, John Dillon, who I just had on, is one of the main contributors of this.
Shut up.
You want to hear who translated this?
Yeah.
David Ahn, Jan Bergman, Hans Dieter Betz. That's the one on the cover. He's the editor. Yeah. Then you have Walter Burkett, one of my favorites, John Dillon, who I just had on my channel, William Greasy, Jackson Hirschbel, Ronald Hock, great scholar, Janet Johnson, Roy D. Katansky, Hubert Martin Meyer, another good one, Edward O'Neill, Robert Rittner, John Scarborough, Amun's doctor, and then Morton Smith.
There's a lot of big.
That's a lineup right there. That's like your all-star cast. But yeah, right. my boy, John Dillon was one of them. That's my boy.
I'm so glad you interviewed him before his time is up here, dude. Because
he's great. Yeah, he's great.
Okay, I don't want to be up till 3 a.m. if we can help it. So if you have a question, you better ask. So help me God, this is your chance. JC in the house. Now this is a question for you, Neal, because he keeps hitting me with linguistic stuff. I can't look. Some of this stuff I don't know where to go with. Do you think the crocus yellow yolk of Easter eggs could have been intended to cover the saffron robes of Eos? I think it's Eos.
Oh wow, this is way above me. This is some educated person right here because I have no idea. Yeah. It's very fascinating. I haven't even looked into this at all. I do want to say this though. People think you hear this all the time around Easter that the whole eggs thing came way later and there's nothing. Actually, I was reading a scholar of ancient Egyptian, an Egyptologist, who was saying that coloring eggs was a rite in ancient Egypt. I don't know if that's where it could be a coincidence. I don't know, but the scholar was saying no. Actually, coloring eggs is an ancient Egyptian rite. I don't know about the yolk of Easter eggs. I don't know what that has to do with, but Eos. I wonder if they're mentioning Eos because of Eostre. Eostre has that root dawn in her name, which tells me she's probably somewhat related to a dawn goddess. Right. So there could be something going on there. That's a good question, though.
JC's big on the linguistic stuff. So again, shout out to Fours.
By the way, I love when people ask me questions that I don't know because it forces me to go and look it up later and find out.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. SDH, keep it up. Really appreciate the support. JC's back again. Thank you for the super chat. See the chapter on lapis lazuli in Ephraim Isles' book on, I hope I said that right, on rocks of the Bible. Sapphire in the Septuagint apparently refers to lapis lazuli.
Yeah, it's that bright blue color. Yeah.
Interesting. Need to get that book. Does a saffroning crocus sativus with its yellow, and there's Hebrew, you would have something probably to be able
It's
to
a have. It's a hove.
on its petals look a bit like lapis lazuli, which Ale says was sapphire.
Yeah. It probably does. Like I said, I'm not the color thing. I haven't really. That's not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like whoever's asking this question is probably knows more than I do.
Yeah.
So I don't
JC
know.
should start a show.
Yeah.
Yeah. TWPB, thank you for the super chat. On a more casual note, any books you guys have picked up or are currently reading that are worth their weight?
Any books you guys have picked up currently reading that are worth their weight? Oh my God. Recently, let me think. Right now, yes. Let me grab it. I have it sitting over by my bed where I lay down every night.
While you do that, I'll mention a couple here. Right now, I'm waiting on Dennis McDonald to launch his book. Where he has a book he's got that's hypothetical of the gospel authors arguing with each other. And that's going to be really, really good because I've been reading his, he sent me the PDF so that I have an idea of it. And then also one I've started reading, A Noble Death by James Tabor and Arthur Drudge. Hope I pronounced his name properly. This is something I'm going to have to do a video on this at some point. I'll put it that way. So I think this is worth investigating more. Suicide and martyrdom among Christians and Jews in antiquity. He goes through from the Maccabees and the idea of martyrdom, where this concept of a noble death and how they would have viewed suicide differently back then. So I think it's an important book worth reading on understanding how this might lend to the early Christian martyrdom stories and maybe actual real martyrdoms that they got themselves killed for. So those are two things. Dennis McDonald's book that isn't out yet, so that's why I feel bad bringing it up, but it'll be out any day now. And then this one.
So I'm working on a documentary, and there's a lot of primary sources that are not like letters people wrote. I love finding. My new favorite thing is reading random letters people write because it offers a lot of glimpses into things that you wouldn't get from just a myth or something. This right here, the Hellenistic world from Alexander to the Roman conquest. Now, one of my favorite books of all time is Peter Green. Where is it? Peter Green's right here. Alexander to Actium. It's the best book of all time about this period between, the 340s, Alexander's time, to Actium. Battle of Actium is where Augustus defeats Mark Antony. So 27 BC. That book has so much information on it about that period. It's the best book ever. But this one is the sources. This one is the letter from Seleucus to a priest or something. And they're talking about what rituals to do or something. Like Dionysus, what should we do to honor Dionysus? That type of stuff. So as I'm laying down at night, I'm flipping through this thing and trying to find interesting sources that I can use for the video that I'm working on. And there's just so much gold in here. There's so much stuff that you never would even think about. Here's a letter from Ptolemy to who is he writing to? Someone named Pausanias.
Now you talking about not the geographer Pausanias, but
no, a different one.
Okay.
Huh. And it's shall be citizens, men born from a Cyrenian father and mother, and Libyan women between the Catpathmos and those born. But just random letters in here.
I gotta warn people.
There's just gold in here.
Neal will send me screenshot after. Bro, I'll be 3 a.m. waking up. Got to go to the bathroom. Neal's sending me some 5 screenshots in a row, and I'm looking at it. I have no clue what I'm reading, and he's like, "Dude, listen, bro. Do you see this? Look at this right here. Check this out. Listen to what he says in the 4th century BC." And I'm thinking, Neal, you probably found stuff in some of these books that some expert on a thing knows that none of these other people are probably aware of or thought this somehow connects to some of this stuff. That's how far some of the stuff you find is to me. I'm like, whoa.
I like to educate myself on what was happening in the reign of Seleucus and his successor, what was happening in the Ptolemies, what was happening over here. What about the kings of the Attalid dynasty that gave over their Pergamon to the Romans. That's the type of stuff that I'm trying to educate myself on recently. So there's a lot, you'll see a lot of that coming out on my channel coming lately. The last big dig that I did was Roman religion, late antiquity. That 4.5 hour, 4 or 5 hour video I did on Roman religion, I thought was like, that took me a long time to make. It took me like a few months to make that.
Yeah, now I would make smaller ones just for your time's sake.
I realized that was a waste. That was not a good idea.
That was my baptism video, 3 hours.
Yeah.
And dude, every second was me putting a part of my spark into that video. Okay, next super chat. S Mill in the house. Thank you for the super chat. What do you think of news that Eastern Mediterranean was trading with British Isles for tin in Bronze Age, probably?
Oh, we know that in the Bronze Age they were going, that Britain is named to like Tin Island or something, and the Phoenicians were traveling all the way there to we actually have archaeological evidence of a trading post at the coast where the Phoenicians were, and they would go there and they would trade with the British to get tin. So Britain was a big part of that tin trade, one of the major locations that people found tin. And that, this is what do I think of that news? It's cool. It's fucking sweet. It's fucking cool to learn how connected the ancient world was. We think of the Bronze Age as like this period of time where like the Mycenaeans are over here doing their thing, and the Hittites are over here doing their thing, and then Egypt's over there doing their thing, and Babylon and Assyria over there doing their thing, and they're all separate. But then when you look at the evidence of the archaeology, for example, what he's pointing out, you see they were trading tin with each other. Not only that, you read the letters of the kings during the Sea People's invasions, and they're like, oh, we need help, we're getting raided, and Egypt's writing to this king over here, and they're all connected. They all know each other. So this idea of like the Bronze Age being like this ancient time where everyone was separated is just not true. They're very connected in the Bronze Age.
Thank you, S. Mill. Tracy Femstar, thank you so much for that super chat. Do you think Mary is connected to Cybele? Well, this is what you and I were.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that, right?
Because
you want to show the tower thing?
I can. Let me pull up the images again. There's that long 3-hour documentary. Okay, there's this. Let's start with this again, like you were saying. This is Cybele, but it's also Isis, but it's also like
so the reason why that people come to that conclusion is it's Artemis. The type of statue is an Artemis type. But if you look at the image, if you want to click on the image for a second, just click on it. She's wearing the tower that Cybele wears. She's flanked by lions like Cybele. And there's also I'm not sure if I can see it on this image, but there's some indications that Isis was also synced into this goddess as well, for a couple of reasons. There's probably some imagery on here. I'm not sure, but the deer and the bees, that's Artemis. But like there's lions on there too. That's Cybele. And so like it's a mixture of goddesses being kind of mixed together, which is normal for 2nd century AD. And this is 2nd century AD. That's when this dates to. So if you read Apuleius's Golden Ass, you'll see why they're doing this. Apuleius is worshiping Isis. He's going to her to get baptized to be saved because he's turning into a donkey. That's why it's called Golden Ass. But to be brought back to his human form, he has to get baptized 7 times by a priest of Isis. But the goddess that he's worshiping, when he starts really worshiping her and like calling her out, he starts calling her all these other names: Cybele, Artemis, Aphrodite. So there was like this one major goddess that was merging in the 2nd century.
Yeah, and I'd like to add just the detail that you and I were discussing before.
Black Madonna thing?
I was just going to point out the idea that Cybele, if you know the myth of Attis, is the one who, through her lamentations, brings him back. And I'm not saying that Mary Magdalene is her lamentations in power, but she's at the tomb. She's mourning the Lord.
Yes.
Like the female goddess.
This has been pointed out by so many people that there seems like there's this sort of type. So it goes back to Ishtar mourning for Dumuzi, and her mourning is a type of magic. Right. And this was a thing. The Syrian Zakru festival, it's called the Zakru festival, was a spring festival where women would mourn. And there was like some sort of ritual mourning. They thought the women mourning would bring the crops back because of this old myth. But then you start to see that manifest in the myths of Osiris, where he has two women mourning for him at his tomb, Nephthys and Isis. Jesus has two women weeping for him at his story. Tomb. Yeah, Mary and Martha. Sometimes it's just Mary, right? Depending on which gospel. You also have in the myth of Adonis. Adonis gets killed. He dies from a boar. A boar bites him. He dies, bleeds out. Aphrodite comes to him and mourns, and then brings him back to life in a weird way. It was like her tears mixed with his blood, and the blood rises up some sort of flower. So it's not like a bodily resurrection. Fine. But you see that the mechanics are there. Also, Attis. Oh, I'm sorry. It's two women that mourn for. There's another version where there's two women. So in one version, it's just Aphrodite. In another version, and by the way, the Nicene preacher mentions this. He mentions Attis, and he mentions Adonis dying, and Persephone and Aphrodite are mourning for him. Can you pull that up real quick?
Let me try.
You gotta see how he compares it to Jesus. Watch this. Can you type in? Okay, do a word
Aphrodite.
Search. Do a word search for Aphrodite. I think, yeah. If not, do Persephone. Is there any more?
Hermaphrodite. Persephone. Let's do Persephone.
Yeah, because it might say Venus in here or something like that. It might have her other name.
It doesn't look like Persephone's.
Let me see. Let me think. What the hell? I know it's in there. There's Venus. Yeah, it says Venus. Oh, no, you're right here. Okay, go up. Venus, he says, desires the soul when styled. Okay, just do a word search for Venus then. We'll find it through there.
Okay. You want me to go to a different place?
Keep going down. Oh no, it's right there. Okay, here we go. We were just there. I'm sorry. I'm dumb. So he says an entity of this description, the Assyrians call Adonis or Endymion. When it is styled Adonis, Venus, he says, loves and desires the soul when styled by such a name. Venus is production, according to them. But whenever Proserpina, so it's the Roman version.
Proserpina,
that's the Roman version. Whenever Proserpina or Cora, that's her name, Cori, it means like, it can mean virgin or maiden, becomes enamored with Adonis, there results, he says, a certain mortal soul separated from Venus, that is, from generation. But should the moon pass into concupiscence, I don't know what that word is.
Concupiscence.
For Endymion, and the love into love of her form, the nature, he says, of higher beings requires a soul likewise. The mother of the gods emasculate Attis and herself as an object of affection. Blessed nature, he says, of the supernal and everlasting beings alone recalls the male power of itself. So he's talking about these two women weeping over this god that brings back production. Isn't that crazy? He's talking about the mystery of the women weeping. But now, and so you have Adonis, two women mourning over him, Proserpina, Venus, or Persephone of Aphrodite. You have Osiris, two women mourning over him, and this is in Plutarch and Diodorus, so it's contemporary. Greek writers knew this. You have Nephthys and Isis for Osiris, Venus and Proserpina for Adonis, and then the Great Mother weeps over Attis, and then Jesus has Mary and Martha. There's like, this weird. It's a weird commonality, but it's like I think there's something going on there.
Yeah, like what are the odds that a resurrected demigod
has two women weeping over them? At their tomb?
And it doesn't have some correlation to the common motifs, right? In our eyes, of course. Okay. Tracy, there could be something.
Oh, we forgot to mention the tower thing.
Oh, I thought we mentioned that earlier, though.
Yeah, let's just show. I don't know when Tracy got here.
Like, you mean the images? Let me just show the images then, because
that's just show that image right there. You just had it. Okay, that's Mary. Go back. That's Mary. That's called the Black Madonna. It's a medieval thing that popped up where they started calling Mary the Black Madonna, right? And started worshiping her as this like goddess figure. Notice how she's wearing the crown. Now go back to the other image. She's got that tower on her head. And like, this is not a huge thing. Scholars don't really say this, but I something I noticed. Magdalene means of the tower, right? In Hebrew, Magdal means tower. Right. So Magdala is like the city of the tower because there was a tower in Magdala. That's why it's called that. So the city of the tower. So like, yeah, maybe Mary Magdalene's a real person from Magdala, or maybe someone was very creative, and maybe Mary Magdalene didn't really exist, and they're just kind of adding this character in to fulfill the Sibylle thing. I don't know.
Yeah, unless we find evidence of like a pre-first century person who names that area that. I mean, that would help.
And they both have a Black Madonna version of them. So it's pretty cool.
Thank you so much for that. Wade Rogers in the house. Also, thank you for the super chat and for being a member. Greek-speaking writers of the New Testament knew about the mysteries of Attis from what they read during their writing lessons, and used this trope to craft the superior story of the dying, rising Jesus.
I think it's possible, and I think at the very least, so the way Philo is a great example of a Jewish writer who's not a heretic. He's dedicated to Judaism. You know, he's not like just some random guy. He's a Jew, but the way he views Greek mythology and Greek philosophy, he loves the Pythagoreans. Talks about the Pythagoreans all the time, how great their doctrines are. He says he's a Platonist. He believes in the Platonic philosophy, but he's Jewish. But he also, the way he views the gods of mythology would be like a Christian who views Marvel characters, and they might compare Jesus to Superman just for fun, not because they believe in Superman, but they just like, oh, cool, Superman's a great figure. He represents, a God who saves everyone, like Christ. Well, Philo, when he's talking about Bacchus, for example, actually, I think I have a screenshot of it ready to go. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I do. Let me see if I can pull this
from Philo of Alexandria.
Yeah, I thought I did. Let me see.
I'm sure you do somewhere.
Yes, I have it. Okay, so can I share my screen?
Yep.
This is from Philo. He says, he's writing this to a embassy of the Romans, Gaius. Have you imitated Bacchus in any respect? Have you been an inventor of any new blessings to mankind? Have you filled the whole of the habitable world with joy as he did? Are all Asia and Europe inadequate to contain the gifts which have been showered upon mankind by you? By the way,
Santa Claus.
But here's the thing. Theodosia is the name of the Bacchus festival that happens on January 5th into January 6th.
Oh, yeah.
It means Theodosia means God's gift. It means Dionysus is bringing gifts. So, and you also have Jesus on the same day of the year, according to Greek Orthodoxy, January 6th is the day of the wedding at Cana, where he gives gifts of wine. Now, coming back to Attis, I would not be surprised if the gospel authors who are Jewish, who believe in they're Jewish, right? They believe in the prophets. They believe in Moses. They believe all this stuff. They're not heretical in their own minds. They might be heretical later on to rabbinic Jew, but these are just Alexandrian Greek-speaking Jews, right? I would not be surprised if they were like Philo, where they're writing about Jesus, but they're sort of applying motifs from the gods around them. They don't think this is the way Philo viewed gods is not a bad thing. He thinks you should imitate the gods because the gods are good. Even if they don't believe in them, they're still figures to follow. I would not be surprised if the gospel authors who are imitating Bacchus, imitating Attis, imitating Osiris, and applying it to Jesus, that doesn't mean Jesus didn't exist. It just means they're taking these themes and applying it to Jesus.
Right. It could lend credibility to that idea, but it's also not necessary to have that, is the point.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Wade, thank you for that super chat, my friend. Let me try to get us caught up here. Daniel Kyle in the house. Daniel, man, thank you for being here, super chatting, and being a member. the Shiva Lingam and the Attis phallus and Dionysus Thyrsus and satyrs. Do you think there's a connection? I think our last guest hasn't explored that.
I think so. I think Shiva is this god that has a lot in common with Dionysus. They're both wearing like animal skins. They both are they're both connected to an intoxication. So with Shiva, it's Soma, heavily connected to Soma. Soma is its own god by itself too. So, but Dionysus is also connected to the Kukeon, and yeah, I think they have a lot in common. I do. I think there's a connection there, and not only me, antiquity writers. There was what's his name? Posidonius of Rhodes also traveled to India, and he thought that the god Shiva was the Indian Dionysus. So,
well, that's like Osiris and Dionysus. If you went to Egypt, you would think based on that, you'd be like, oh, they are the same. Solera Knight, thank you for the super chat. Did Flavian Romans that got Hebrew scriptures around 70 AD rewrite the story of Attis to become Jesus Christ in Constantine's New Testament revision to appease conquered pagans, Yahwists, Christians, etc.?
I wouldn't go that far. I don't think the Flavians. Now it is true that Philo is the nephew of, or Philo's nephew was one of the generals who is I have his Tiberius Alexander. Julius Tiberius Alexander was Philo's nephew, who was one of the generals of Titus Flavius, who was sitting there watching the temple getting destroyed by the Romans, and he was on the side of the ones doing it. He didn't care about it. He was
right.
He's half Roman, half Jewish.
They were apocalypticists anyway, and
but that says that there could have been somebody in his camp, in the Flavian camp, the intelligentsia, the educated class that were affiliated with gospel authors. That I would be more willing to go. But as far as like like Titus himself getting involved in gospels, I don't think so. There's just to me, it's just too much. But like I said, there could be people in Titus Flavius's camp in Alexandria, for example, because he has the Roman prefect was in Egypt in the first century, and that was like a high up. They were the people very high, very powerful. When 9 times out of 10, when a Roman emperor got killed, like Nero, for example, it was the Egyptian prefect. It was one of those guys in charge saying, "We need a new emperor. Fuck this guy." Like that's how powerful they were. They had the power to like remove emperors and get a new one in there. And that's what happened. Titus Vespasian, the father, Titus Vespasian Sr., when he was what he did was, as he's in Judea, it's the year of the 4 emperors. So first you have Galba take over after Nero gets killed. Galba is only in power for 2 months. He gets killed by Otho. And then Otho is one of Nero's back to Nero's camp, takes over again. He's Nero's like best friend. So it's almost like Nero's back in power, but it's Otho now. And then Vitellius, this big fat slimy rich aristocrat, and he kills him, and then he's in power. And this whole time, the East, there's actually a map that shows this. Let me show you this map.
Yeah.
Year of the 4 emperors map. Here it is. Let me see. I'll share my screen. Here it is. This is a cool map. This will give you an idea of what I'm talking about real quick. Here. Can you see this?
Let it load. There it goes.
Okay, so this is in 69 AD, the year of the 4 emperors. So this region right here said Galba is our emperor. These people over here were like, no, we like Nero. Put Otho in, because that's one of Nero's like good friends. And then this other guy was like, no, I'm gonna be the emperor, Vitellius. This whole time while this is all going on, see Vespasianus, the East, Syria, Egypt, Judea, was like, no, Vespasian is our guy. And they're calling for him. But so he's waiting in Alexandria this whole time for things to calm down in Rome. And then once Vitellius gets into power, see December or April, in between April and December, he gets his army ready. He leaves his son here. He leaves his other son up here. See, they're calling for him too. This is where Domitian is. This is where Titus is. This is where Vespasian is. And then he makes his move, and he comes back right in the good timing. And his brother got killed. One of Vespasian's brother gets killed. This is in Suetonius. But anyways, the whole point I'm making is Vespasian was hailed as the emperor by the Egyptians and the Judeans and Syrians before he even got into power. And he just kind of waited out. He just kind of waited for the storm to settle down while he was out down in Egypt, and then went back to Rome. Smart guy.
Yeah.
Smart guy. And the Rome needed someone like him at that time. They were done with the Nepo aristocratic idiots. They were like, we need somebody who's like from the military ranks, to take over, which is what happened.
Powerful. The motherfucking Wendyberg. Thank you for the big super, for being a member, for being a Patreon. Like Wendy's everywhere. I really appreciate it, and being my friend. Seems to me that early Christians were far more open to thought that Christianity came from other sources than the Christians of today.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it's 100%, because like I always talk about, like this is a big bang explosion of Christianity. It's not like a direct line, and then people become more spread out as time goes by. Christians are more aligned today than ever. They all believe Jesus died and resurrected. They all believe that he's the Son of God. They all believe in the basics, besides a few sects out there. Most of them do. But like early Christianity was like what you get in the PGM. They're like, well, Jesus is just another one of these daemons.
He wasn't a god. He was a normal human being, or
he became a daimon the same way Caesar did, right? Like he became like, that was a very popular idea too.
Or he didn't really die. He saw someone else it looked like him, but it wasn't him. He was laughing while they were doing it. Like there's some crazy stories, bro.
That's the Basilidean version of Simon of Cyrene. Yeah. But no, I think the super chat's on point. The script are far more open to thought that Christianity came from other sources than Christians today. Yeah, and like you get that in the PGM, and you get that in the Nicene Preacher, and I think there's definitely evidence of that.
Obviously, you wouldn't have the heresiologist admit to such a thing, but yes, these other Christians would have been more open to the influences, probably being more than just.
I agree with you for the most part, but Eusebius in the 4th century writes this giant book called Preparation for the Gospel, where he's saying all the pagans have always been pointing to Christ ever since.
He did it cleverly, though. That was a really interesting way how he brought in Cronus and and the dying and rising of his son Yedud and the whole nine. Like, so yeah, you got a good point there. Like he realized that the pagan sources, these ancient sources, including the Greek sources, predicted the Christ.
Yeah,
but he did it in a kosher,
non-heretical way. Yeah, he did it in a way where he was like, they didn't have the truth, but they were close. They were trying to get there. They were tapped into something.
Exactly. Good super chat, Wendy. Thank you so much. Daniel again in the house. Thank you, Daniel. I'd love to chat with you guys and nerd out sometime. I love how you guys really love doing this.
Absolutely. I love this stuff. It's so fun.
We breathe this stuff. I mean, I love it. You really, really do. If I'm not watching TV with the wife and I'm getting a text from Neal, I'm wondering, is he alive? Is everything okay? Hold on. What's this Greek text he's sending me a picture of now?
Buried in my books over here.
Right. Innate Utrera. Thank you for the super chat. For real, I feel like I need a class or a translator to understand the stuff Neal is talking about. You've gone deep, bro.
Thank you. Maybe I should start to bring it back a little bit or I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think it's just doing these lives, breaking down and taking your time to explain. That's why before we started, you do go deep. I'm always like, hold on, Neal, explain who Attis even is, because you're already knee deep in the pond. And
that's true. I forget that sometimes. My cousin, who's not into any of this stuff, I showed him one of my videos one time, and he had he was like, this is great, but I just have one critique. Don't get mad at me, but he's like, I don't understand what you're saying at all. I was like, all right, I gotta. And it was a realization that I need to start when I'm doing my videos. I just need to bring it down a little bit. I don't like to use the term dumb down, because it's I'm not dumbing it down. I'm just making it more understand for people to understand, because it doesn't mean you're dumb if you don't understand it. It just means you don't understand all the lingo. It just doesn't mean you're not. It just means you're not studying. That's all. That's
literally what I did with my Attis videos. So this follow-up live we're doing right now is in response to the video I just just did on my channel where I just point out the Hilaria and I show the 3-day festival, and it's totally pop level, easy to understand, fun, 20-minute video. This is much more like, let's chop it down. Let's explain sources. Let's tell you what these sources say and all that. So anyway, JC in the house, we got all by JC, and then a new member who wants eternal salvation. They want to resurrect and become the galley. So JC, I'm going to try and read these, and I'm going to see if there's a pause or if I should just read through all of these supers. Sumerian Hersog, I think it's Hersog, is also Azubir, the root of saffron. Saffron, huh?
It says in Hebrew, Sephori.
Okay.
Saphire, sorry. Saphire.
It's saffron in the Qumran scrolls was TZPR. Dawn is also, and there's the Hebrew, I think you're saying Saphiri.
Saphiri, yeah.
The Septuagint refused to translate it.
Yeah, that's what the Septuagint does all the time. It just transliterates everything. There's another word in there, I think it was like from Deuteronomy, where it's like doesn't know what to do with it. It's like this certain molten metal that you get, and they didn't know what it was, so they just transliterate it. There's a whole bunch of examples of that.
Yeah,
and it doesn't happen the other way around ever. Like you don't find in the Hebrew a transliterated Greek word unless it's from, I don't know, maybe some of the
maybe a late
text.
Daniel.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. That could be a good question to look into, but not in the majority of it. Majority, it's pretty clear what side is being translated. I don't know. I've never heard anyone give any good rebuttals to this ever. They just ignore.
I wouldn't even say Daniel. I think we're talking like Maccabees and stuff. Yeah.
Like if you try to go to Amon Hillman and say, "What do you think about this word right here?" That's nowhere to be found in any Greek sources anywhere. It only exists in the Septuagint. And it just happens to be exactly the same transliteration of this Hebrew word that's all over Hebrew.
Right.
He just goes. He just
Let me
runs away.
spank Jesus.
He just runs away.
What'd you say, Jesus?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
He just runs away. Yeah.
Yeah. JC again in the house. See Akkadian Supru and Sipru, knell and horn. See Nebuchadnezzar's knell. This is some apocalyptic stuff. The heavens roll up above you like a Sefer.
Yeah, this is some deep stuff that I want to look into.
Bro, like I think I need to do a live stream, start doing some private Patreon live streams.
Yeah.
And learn from some of the people who support us. You know what I mean?
These are great super chats, by the way. Great super chats.
Yeah, JC, again, the mosaics of Paphos have crocuses, Magdal stone.
You know where Paphos is, right?
No.
That's where Aphrodite is worshipped, on the island of Cyprus.
Okay. Huh.
Paphos. That's the big Aphrodite temple there. So
Magdal
maybe.
Stone?
Yeah.
That's another thing you brought up the whole Kaaba. Like, man, how much of this relates to Mithraeus or the birth from a stone?
Yeah, Allah Gobalus, and he's worshipped in the form of a black stone. And his name is literally Allah Gobalus. It's a Semitic god. Just saying. And there could have been some holdouts going on in the East up until Islam, and they might have brought those into the fold.
Yeah. That's JC again. Umbin is Nell, Supru, and Will Magdala stone. I don't know anything about it.
That's fascinating. Ubin. What is it? Umbin?
Umbin.
Umbin is Nell. Supru is and Wheel. Magdala stone. That's fascinating.
Thank you again. Didn't Yahweh's hands have horns?
I don't know. Probably, maybe.
I know that he did. Like
some description from like Exodus, maybe.
I know that he was depicted as a bull at times.
That's true.
But I don't know.
Dionysus was bull too.
Yeah. Here's another one I have no freaking clue to even read. I know
Nesh. I know when you have that little thing. I mean, it's a sh. So it's Nesh Gigir. Nesh Gigir is chakra. Huh.
JC in the house with another brain buster. Goran, everybody welcome him or them, whoever they are, to the party, becoming immortal today just by joining as a member. Also, I ask everyone who's watching right now, if you haven't participated, subscribe with Gnostic Informant, join his Patreon, become a member of his channel. We really could use the help. in terms of making this thing keep growing and to do more of these. I want to get Neal doing more live streams because he's always editing a really good podcast, or he's taking a month to go to Greece and film. And I'm like, look, you really do need to get these lives going and start hanging out more with everybody on the internet, your friends and stuff.
Yeah, I gotta start doing some lives too.
Yeah, and let me know, and I'll be happy to come and harass you on your live stream too, because I know that can be hard.
JC is keeping the lights on, that's for sure.
Yep, JC in the house. Jesus Christ.
Herschen, is the mountain of the abode of El, derived from Sumerian Hursag. Didn't the deity walk on super lapis bricks, crocus, Magdala altar? Maybe. This is wherever you're at right now. It's way above where I'm at. So
yeah, I don't have a clue.
Hursag.
Mountain of the abode of El, derived from Sumerian Hursag. I don't know. In Ugaritic, that's Ugaritic.
Plausible. I mean, wouldn't it be more likely to be Akkadian than Sumerian though? I'm not sure though. I don't know. Because Akkadian is the Semitic language. Sumerian is this old pre-Semitic language. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's Sumerian vocabulary that gets into Akkadian and then that travels down to Ugaritic somehow. Maybe. It makes sense. I don't know.
Again, JC, everybody who super chatted, I seriously appreciate you. Now I must shamelessly plug. You, Neal. We gotta pull up your YouTube, bro. You do so much hard work, man. And I hope people will go subscribe to my brother. Look, man, tell them the story before we go, and make sure if you haven't subscribed to me and you're coming over from Neal because you share this, be sure to subscribe so you're catching everything we do. Neal, tell them how we met. What what's up, man?
Oh, we did it. I joined your Patreon and then reached out to you to come on my channel, which I just started. It was brand new. You were already like 20,000 subscribers at that point. I had like nothing. I had like 500 maybe. And then I had you on and I got a huge boost from it. I was like, I think you got me to 1,000 subscribers that week or something. We were just talking about, we both had an addiction in our past. We both recovered. We both got into we both became Christians for like a long time. And then we both got into this. It was like we had the same story. It was weird. 2 years apart, right? Same story. You're 2 years older than me, but you've been doing this 2 years in front of me. Right. And you got clean 2 years before I got clean. So it's very strange how that worked out. It is, man. You're my brother, bro. You're just 2 years ahead of me. That's all. I saw when you interviewed me, you had this spunk, bro. You had the spark. If I was the God above God looking down, I'd be like, yep, that's part of me that he has in him. I'm the Christ. I saw it. I was like, dude, you have what it takes. You have what it takes. And turned out to be right. I was like, bro, if you just I was working in a factory back then. Yep. I was working in a factory. Big crazy hours. Sometimes I have 16-hour shifts overnight. Killing Red Bulls every time I call. You're like, this tire factory I worked at, Sumitomo Rubber. I'll get a 12-hour shift. That's the shifts work, 12 hours. And you would get in there and right at the 11th hour, you can't wait. You're sweating. You can't wait to get out of there. Some guy would walk up and go, "Oh, you got to do 4 more hours. The guy's coming late. You got to fit. You got to like." And that's how they would get. You couldn't say no. It was part of you saw like when you get the job, you say you would do that. Like you're willing to work the hours. And I just remember getting so sick of doing that. You were juggling both, and then you sent me a video. I wish I had. It was so funny to laugh at of you getting pinned. You got pinned. Oh my god, with the car. Yeah, let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. Don't bring that up. Hey, you sent it to me, but with no audio. You're like, yeah, you are not listening to me. Yeah, that was bad. That could have been really bad. Oh man, that was wild, bro. That was wild. Oh man, but I love you, bro. We got a couple more supers that popped in. I just want to show appreciation. Like, yeah, let's finish them up. We're both on a mission, and you're doing things I'm not doing, but we will be doing tours to Greece in the future, and when things calm down, to the holy sites that we've seen over in Jerusalem and in the area, all around that area. I miss it. I like being there. It was fun. I like the desert too. I like being in the desert. Absolutely. So subscribe. Okay. Maybe we'll take a little quick flight, 30-minute flight to Petra too. Maybe it's right there. It's like a half an hour flight from Israel.
Why not? Well, we probably could just cross over and do a journey because there's a lot.
I think you can do that. I think you can. Yeah.
I think there's a lot to see over there as well,
Yeah.
as far as sites.
Yeah.
On Robertson, thank you for the super chat. Just love it and regaling in both your frenzy enthusiasm for making the ancient world more exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Stellara Knight in the house again. Thank you. Hebrew, Greek, Latin, English, hard to translate between these actually.
Yeah.
All proper names are transliterated between languages. Explain.
Well, it's because a name is a name. Like Jesus is in Hebrew is Yeshua or Yehoshua. And then in Greek, just because of the way the Greek alphabet is, I mean, you got to use instead of, you don't have a yod, you have iota, but you also don't have like you can't make it the same. So it's going to be Jesus. It's going to be similar. It's going to be how it comes out in the Greek, and then it gets into Latin as Jesus, and then eventually the French, I think, are the first ones to do the J thing, Jesus. You know,
interesting.
It's just names you don't translate the name. Like the name might mean something. Jesus might mean salvation of Yahweh, but you don't translate the name. You just transliterate because it's just the name. It's the same person.
Right. Right. And then we have Jason Kakulo. Thank you so much, Jason. At JC, chakra is Vedic. The Bronze Age Mitanni could have influenced Canaanites.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason why they're bringing up Vedic is because the Mitanni are an Indo-European people who lived in Mesopotamia, right in the middle of Mesopotamia, which later became where the Assyrians take over. And in the 1400 BCE, we have a cuneiform tablet from the Mitanni with all the Vedic gods on it. So it's got like Indra, Mitra, I forgot who else is on there. There's a bunch of Vedic gods on this Mesopotamian cuneiform tablet by the Mitanni. And so, like, if you look at a map of the Mitanni, can you pull it up real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, share.
Mitanni Empire. Okay, so look at this. Actually, let me just look at the Wikipedia and show that. All right, look at this. This is where the Mitanni were.
You're not sharing yet.
Yeah. So look at this. Mesopotamia is right here. Mitanni's right here. And, you know, oh yeah, the Egyptians were ruling all the way up until right here. Like they made it all the way up here in this time period in the Bronze Age. They were ruling all of Canaan. So look at you're right near the Mitanni. So it's not that crazy to think that there might be some Mitanni influence or even back and forth between both of them.
Right.
And the Mitanni were very influential and very, very cultural. So I wouldn't be surprised if something from the Mitanni or even just the Hittites or something makes its way into that part of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely mingling going on.
It's all, yeah, they're all there in the middle, in the Near East. They're all together. And so like, you can't just separate Semitic languages from Indo-European languages as like they're blocked off from each other. Like they are trading with each other. They do know, they have scribes that know both languages. These things are being passed around.
Right.
So,
and like most countries today, even, I mean, like, how do you think we get along and have trade along, today, even? It's like apply the same rule that you would today with other countries. You
look at this right here. Cuneiform tablet containing a letter from Tushratta of Mitanni to Amenhotep of the Egyptians. They're writing letters to each other. They're in connection to each other. They're not separated from each other. They're part of the same world. They have similar culture. So good super chat.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We got one more popped in here. GD in the house. Thank you so much for the super duper. Thoughts on why I like this question. Pastoralists are favored in the Old Testament, Cain and Abel, as well as Sumerian myth, Demutzi. Why this favoritism throughout time? Why the consistent farmer hatred? So this is something I think you and I both could probably run with into all sorts of areas, but I think the older Hittite and Mesopotamian myths, there are farmer myths that are like in the ancient Mesopotamian stories, and I don't have the names of those actual myths right here off the top of my hand, but like they would have some that would condemn the farmer that had the animals and whatnot, and then some that actually favored the
shepherd.
The shepherd.
Yeah, the shepherds are the ones who are like taking all the animals out, and they're the ones like making like fleeces and giving meat to bringing meat to the market. And then you have the farmers who are tilling the land and growing crops. There's two different professions. You also have fishermen so there's all these professions. One is more low class.
One is more mobile though. So like if you were the shepherd, you're more mobile. You're able to go on the go. Yeah. And there was actually fighting that took place. Herodotus talks about this with some of the Scythians who actually had that more the mobile type of shepherding as their style. And they were so difficult to overcome by the Persians that they kind of like realized they were going to be impossible to beat. It's almost like modern day warfare where there's so many different little like groups of I guess you could say, if we were going to say terror groups or whatever, like there's so many different people, you're never going to win it. You can't win. There's just too many different separate individualistic camps, and they could never win. But I don't know if this had anything to do with warfare originally. I think this had to do with survival. And I think Cain is viewed in this way that's he's viewed in a way that seems to be fitting the more agricultural and that is more settled, and it's about building civilization, because you're not going to build a civilization based on pure farmers. You will if you have agriculture. That means you have food. That means you have time to think. That means you have kings sitting there with their thumbs up their ass and they're running empires. Well, Genesis is a reversal of the ziggurat and all of those things. So that's kind of what I think.
It is interesting. They love throughout all the Old Testament and the prophets and whatnot. The shepherd is always seen as like this noble. Like David's a shepherd, right?
Right.
But then you don't get that same love for some of the farmers. You don't see that. But in Greece, in Eleusis, they love the farmers. The farmers are divine. The farmers are great. They're
in Mesopotamia,
they're devotees of Demeter. They love, Demeter loves her farmers.
Yep.
So I never even thought about this though. That's a good question from GD. I don't know what the deal is. Why the shepherds get all the love and the farmers don't. It's a good question. Maybe the aristocracy was just closer to the shepherd class for some reason.
Maybe,
but I do know it was being a farmer was rough. You're on the bottom of the totem pole. You're not at the top. You live outside of the city too. You don't live inside the city. Neither do the shepherds either. But still, you are on the outside looking in.
Yeah, this is a really good question. Like, what is the reasons? I'd like to know from a scholarly perspective all of the reasons why the shepherd would be favored in one over the farmer. Yeah,
it's a good question. I never even thought about it until I saw the super chat. I'm being honest right now. I never even thought about that.
Well, I've thought about it, but I think it's deeper than the way I'm answering it. I think there's much more behind why one would be more nomadic. Maybe it's because they're so on the go all the time. I really don't know.
Talking to what's his name? Jonathan Adler. I don't know why. Just talked to him.
Okay.
Talking to Jonathan Adler, one of the things me and him both sort of are like leaning towards right now is this interest in forget about the aristocracy, forget about the priestly class. What was the average farmer and fisherman doing during the Iron Age or during the Hellenistic period? Like that's why I love the PGM, because you're getting texts from people who barely know how to write, and you're finding out what they think, what do they like to do, what is their gods, what are they? It's because when you read the Old Testament, you're getting a skewed lens of the ancient world. You're not getting a good representation of the ancient world. You're getting an aristocratic, priestly lens of the ancient world. People that lived in the court of the king, priest class, something like that, Jerusalem. Right. But they don't represent everybody, So
yeah, good question, GD.
Yeah,
seriously, thank you. And then JC says the her of Hersog is Tertu Torah cognate. JC should really
JC should write a book about this stuff.
Literally, yeah. And this looks like, is that Akkadian?
Yeah.
Also,
some sort of cuneiform. I don't know if it's Akkadian, but it could be. Is also used because a cuneiform is the actual writing glyphs. Akkadian is the language. So it could be Akkadian, it could be Sumerian, it could be is also used for cognate of draw as Josh.
Interesting. Well, any final words from you, Neal, before we wrap things up here, man? I just hope people will go subscribe to you and support you.
I'm working on this documentary from Greece right now. I'm also working on the Amon Hillman video. So I got two things. I'm going back and forth working on both at the same time. Whichever I feel like. Probably the Amon video might be out first.
What's that about?
Well, I talked to Luke Ranieri and asked his thoughts on some of this stuff, and then I'm just going to do my own little presentation of what happened, why I was interested in Amon Hillman's work, why I still think people should watch him. I don't think people should stop watching him, and then what I think he's wrong about. That's it.
Okay. And then
people want to know. Oh, and then Neo Prototype. Thank you for reminding. Carl Ruck was interviewed by Steven. So
really?
There's a whole segment of what Carl Ruck thinks about this work.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very. It's not what everyone's been saying. Not what everyone's been told. That's for sure.
Wow. Well, Tara is right. I agree. They need to go follow. And then, so as far as the Greek documentary, are we going to be pretty impressed? What do you think? How are you thinking this is going to go, bro?
Oh my God, I think it'll be the best video I've ever made. Because I have a bunch of people I interviewed while I was in Greece, and I'm going to splice those into the video as I'm talking about different subjects. And I start off with like Greece, Mycenaeans, into the Hellenistic period. I sort of flow through the story, and then I get into the so-called Christian takeover. And I really want to highlight, number one, how much Christianity draws from the Greek world, and number two, people were fighting off. People were to the 4th century. There were people resisting the Christian aristocracy when they took over. They weren't converting in droves. They were being socially pressured to that. And all the way, I have primary sources going all the way to the 8th and 9th century of pagan holdouts in the countrysides, in Arcadia, in Asia Minor. Pagans still holding on with they love their ancient rites. People don't just give up their ancestral customs. That's not a thing.
Right.
It's always force that causes those things to happen. And that's kind of what the video is about. It's about Christianity versus Greek paganism. It's like a little battle, a little war, a little mythological war between the two, but in a very fair way. I'm not going to be biased. I'm not just going to be. I am a little biased. I'll admit that. But I actually have a priest that I interviewed, or I didn't interview him.
Neal or Steven did.
In
Greek, right?
Yeah, some things that he says that are very interesting. And you'll see. It'd be good.
Well, I hope everybody subscribes to Neal, and never forget, we are MythVision, and you have just attained true gnosis.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.